Faites l'appel, s'il vous plaît, Madame le greffier.
Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Hélier. Présent. Madame le connétable de Saint-Laurent.
Présente.
Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Brelade.
Présent.
Monsieur le connétable de la Trinité.
Présent.
Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Pierre.
Présent.
Madame le connétable de Saint-Martin.
Présente.
Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Jean.
Présent.
Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Clément.
Présent.
Monsieur le connétable de Greville.
Présent.
Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Ouen.
Présent.
Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Marie.
Présent.
Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Sauveur.
Présent.
Monsieur le député Southern. Madame le député Labbé. Monsieur le député Tadier. Monsieur le député Luce.
Présent.
Madame le député Dublé.
Présente.
Monsieur le député Morel.
Présent.
Madame le député Lehegara.
Présente.
Monsieur le député Ayer.
Présent.
Monsieur le député Ward.
Présent.
Madame le député Alves.
Présente.
Madame le député Gardner.
Présente.
Monsieur le député Gause.
Présent.
Monsieur le député Farnham.
Présent.
Madame le député Moore.
Présente.
Monsieur le député Mézet.
Présent.
Monsieur le député Ozov.
Présent.
Monsieur le député Balash. Monsieur le député Coles.
Présent.
Madame le député Poré. Monsieur le député War.
Présent.
Madame le député Miles.
Présente.
Madame le député Scott.
Présente.
Monsieur le député Renouf.
Présent.
Madame le député Curtis.
Présente.
Madame le député Feltham.
Présente.
Madame le député Binet.
Présente.
Madame le député Jeune.
Présente.
Madame le député Miller.
Présente.
Madame le député Howell.
Présente.
Monsieur le député Binet. Monsieur le député Ferry.
Présent.
Madame le député Kovac.
Présente.
Monsieur le député Curtis. Madame le député Ward.
Présente.
Madame le député Wilson.
Présente.
Madame le député Stevenson. Monsieur le député Andrews.
Madame le greffier.
Prions Dieu, notre aide soit au nom de Dieu qui a fait les cieux et la terre. Amen. Seigneur Dieu, Père éternel et tout-puissant, qui a établi les gouvernements et les puissances de la terre pour le règlement et pour la conduite du peuple, et qui nous a commandé d'avoir toujours pour but la gloire de son Saint-Nom, nous te prions qu'il te plaise de donner à cette assemblée le don de conseil et de prudence, d'unir les cœurs et les affections de tous ceux qui la composent, et de les conduire tellement toi-même par ton Saint-Esprit, que toute la délibération est accompagnée de ta bénédiction, réussisse au bien et au soulagement du peuple qui te plut de commettre le soin. Car nous t'en prions au nom et par le mérite de ton Fils bien-aimé Jésus-Christ, notre Seigneur, qui nous a enseigné de t'invoquer en disant: Notre Père, qui es aux cieux, ton nom soit sanctifié, ton règne vienne, ta volonté soit faite dans la terre comme au ciel. Donne-nous aujourd'hui notre pain quotidien, et nous pardonnons nos offenses, comme nous pardonnons à ceux qui nous ont offensés. Et ne nous induis point en tentation, mais délivre-nous du mal. Car toi, le règne, la puissance et la gloire, au siècle des siècles. Amen. Monsieur le député Southern.
Défaut.
Madame le député Labbé.
Présente.
Monsieur le député Tadier.
Défaut.
Monsieur le député Balash.
Défaut.
Madame le député Stevenson.
Excuse on the grounds of family obligations.
Assembly demande.
Les États sont constitués.
Sir,
Deputy
can I,
Wells.
may I raise defo on Deputy Tadier and Deputy Southern, please?
Was content to raise the defo on those members? Defo is raised.
Sir, I have funerals to return later this morning, if I may, but I will be returning.
Thank you very much, Martin. We now return to the amendments to the government plan, and the last amendment to be debated is the second amendment lodged by Deputy Miles. I invite the greffier to read the amendment.
Paragraph O. After the words "as set out in the appendix to the accompanying report," insert the words "except that on page 59, after the words "in subsequent budgets subject to affordability," there should be inserted the following new paragraph. An allocation of £100,000 will be made within the funding for public realm budget to prioritise work on the West of Ireland planning framework as referenced in Strategic Proposal 4 in the Bridging Island Plan 2022 to 25.
Deputy Miles.
Thank you, sir. This amendment requests £100,000 from within the public realm budget to prioritise the West of Ireland planning framework as part of the Bridging Island Plan approved in March 2022. The Bridging Island Plan aims to accommodate development within the built-up area and to protect local services in the west of the island. We're told that the framework will precede specific area-based master plans and involve significant stakeholder engagement to address strategic issues, development needs, infrastructure, transport and community facilities in the west of the island. All of these master plans are to come, sir, which is excellent, but without the framework, we can't even get out of the starting blocks. Over recent years, more and more development has taken place in the west of the island, and in the Lekenevay and Lamoy areas of St Brelard in particular. This has brought with it new opportunities and new challenges, as well as compounding existing challenges. The majority of people in St Brelard are understanding of the new developments that have taken place in our parish. We are largely a suburban area, and in places are now becoming increasingly urban. There are, and should be, associated benefits to new developments for existing residents. Greater urbanisation won't be for everyone, but most St Brelard residents accept the reality and see the opportunity. We now have the best and most modern secondary school in the island located in our parish, situated on a greenfield site, and a new refurbished health centre on a brownfield site. Both are on our doorstep. We have the best bus routes, we have beautiful beaches, parks, play areas. There are benefits as well, sir, for our neighbours in other western parishes. St Brelard is keeping development pressures off rural areas in the west, and parishioners of St Peter, St Juan and St Mary, for example, all benefit from the facilities we have in St Brelard. But we're starting to see issues, sir. Whilst we're seeing more and more development being pushed towards St Brelard, we're not seeing the other side of the deal. The plan for investment and improvement in the wider area, despite a number of growing voices that are calling for it. Putting more homes and services in St Brelard and the west of the island can work, but the creaking will become louder and louder if it doesn't form part of a thought-through strategy and framework. So, arguably the primary challenge of a Western planning framework will be how to manage and enhance the heart of what has been called our secondary urban centre, Lekenevay Parade and Precinct. This should be the focal part of the plan for St Brelard. It should be a retail and community centre for Jersey. Just think how many people, locals and tourists alike, pass through that area every day. Indeed, in 2022, I campaigned on the reinvigoration of this area. Over the years, and I still regret today, there has been a lack of effort to understand the situation in the Lekenevay Parade and Precinct. As we know, there is a complex ownership situation of both areas. It has been too easy to do nothing and look at the result. Now, I know that people live above the retail units at the Parade and Precinct. It's their home, and none of this commentary is aimed at them. Indeed, I think they would share my vision for that area. And I'd also like to reiterate at this point, sir, that I am not asking for funds to renovate a privately owned area, which is how this funding has been misreported in some media. I would, however, dearly love to see a facelift at Lekenevay. The state of the precinct in particular, with so many units, is a sorry one indeed. I recommended a community services hub there, but there's no appetite for that from within government. A master plan will give an opportunity to explore what is and what isn't possible. As a deputy and a long-standing parishioner, I want to see the revitalisation of the parade and the precinct. I wonder when the minister was last out west to see what the issues are for himself. We've lost all but one of the banks, the school uniform shop, the dog groomer, the perfumery, the surf shop, and many other small shops that provided essential services used by a lot of islanders, not just St Brelard's residents. I want to see some support from the government, but what is the vision? I've already suggested some small things to help the parade and precinct: put in a bike rack, repaint the mushroom bollards, make the area more floral, grow herbs and tomatoes for passers-by to pick and eat. We've got 2 Christmas trees now at the entrance and the exit, and we remember to turn the lights on, but that's about it. I've spoken to many businesses in that area, and I know they would love to see greater interest from the government, from anyone. But our attitude always seems to be it's privately owned and therefore there's nothing we can do. There's no effort to work in partnership with the landlord, the parish and the government to see what can be done. The area just gradually deteriorates and will continue to do so, unless a new business opens up and does what they can to enhance the surroundings. To be honest, sir, trying to get anywhere in respect of the parade and precinct has been like pushing water uphill. Could States of Jersey Development Company play a proactive role in negotiations with the landlord? Are there other options? Surely we can be more proactive, innovative, creative. Sir, there's a growing sense that we are being treated as the poor relation when it comes to enhancing and improving the West for the growing number of people who live there and the increasing number of people who are coming out there to receive services. I'm asking for £100,000 from a £2.5 million budget to try and drive forward the public realm in the West. Unless we improve Llanelvey, do ministers and planning officials really think that their strategy for the West is going to work? The beautiful St Brelard report surveyed parishioners at the beginning of the year, and we know what parishioners need to improve participation in community activities and improve health outcomes. It's heartening to see community activities developing at Communicare again, and the St Brelard Sports and Social Club, now that it's under new management with big plans. The Enid Kenno Health Centre appears to be operating successfully as a health hub and has the capacity to deliver more community-based services. As I've said, sir, there are opportunities and I want to be positive, but we need some give from government as well. The Minister for Infrastructure agreed that the Llanelvey Sports Centre is ageing and needs attention. The pool has been closed several times this year for lengthy periods. Decisions need to be taken about its future, and he said that that work will start next year. Again, how can that work be influenced by the community if there's no framework for engagement? The sports centre is a key resource for the whole island and simply cannot be left to fall into disrepair or to be redeveloped in isolation. We also have Strive, sir, across the border in St Peter, which has the potential for expansion, and it's already providing important community activities for private clients and the funded Move More programme. As a St Brelard deputy, I share my fellow deputies' frustration at the postponement of the St Brelard's Bay Improvement Plan. It is one of our most beautiful areas, a wide sandy beach that's arguably the best on the island, with a number of high-class hotels. And yet a planning application to convert the old Lamacondry into good quality staff accommodation to support the hospitality in the industry in the West was rejected. And yet an earlier application for it to be a cannabis laboratory was approved. There is no joined-up thinking, no vision, no plan, and it would appear that no thought has been given to the other bays in the West and how they might be improved. The opportunities to develop La Creux as a country park for the west of the island are huge. Both myself and my fellow Deputy Reniff have a vision for the site, but nowhere to channel those ideas. And I'm sure that Deputy Reniff will elaborate during his speech, so I will not steal his thunder. Suffice it to say, I'm incredibly frustrated at the missed opportunity for community and environmental pilots that could have taken place this year. In terms of road safety, the Route de Noirmont pedestrian safety scheme has been put on hold. This has been needed for literally years. It is a dangerous road and accidents are common. Parents cannot allow their children to walk to school, and some residents on that road actually use their cars to drive their dogs to Noirmont for a walk. Residents have been told there are other priorities. How can prioritisation in the West be effective without a planning framework? As I've said, all of this matters for St Brelard, but also St Peter, St Juan, St Mary, because parishioners in those parishes use these areas and facilities as well. In terms of the overall West of Ireland infrastructure, we heard about the liquid waste strategy. We heard that significant investment is planned to enable the new developments in St Peter. The Minister for Infrastructure stated that there would be additional capacity in the attenuation tank for potential new housing in St Peter and a wider area. When asked to what extent the future development had been estimated and modelled, he admitted that work had taken place, but again in isolation and not part of a broader plan. Parishioners in the West have been promised mains drains are coming their way for decades, and it has never happened. There doesn't seem to be a cohesive plan for how it will ever happen. We know that St Mary's School Nursery has closed due to lack of numbers. Needs are changing, but we don't have a bigger picture in which to understand those changes. What is the plan for sand extraction in the quarries in St Peter's Valley? Are we going to continue to produce locally or totally rely on imported materials? The St Peter's deputies have already seen off one application for the extension of Le Giglon quarry. What are the economic development opportunities? There is land opposite the airport that has the potential for light industry or storage. What is the thinking around the connectivity between the parishes? A hopper bus to the Co-op or Marks in St Peter and Waitrose in St Brelard. Bus connectivity between the coast and countryside without having to travel into town. Where is the thinking about the access to bays for tourists and residents alike? There's no buses going to Plymouth anymore. If Deputy Stevenson was here, she would tell you that we would benefit from village plans, or at least updating those that exist. In the past, government helped parishes to fund these to provide a vision for the villagers, which ultimately help bring people together about development, road safety, and even speed limits. She tells me that in St Juan, parishioners constantly feel that government is doing things to their parish without consulting them or linking up to a joined-up plan. She cites the new bus stop layout in the village as an example. We need some joined-up thinking. 3 parishes couldn't even agree on the installation of wooden bollards to address problem parking on the 5-mile road. Development in the West is already piecemeal. The very comprehensive Jersey Pearl application was withdrawn. The refurbishment of the water splash did not find favour, although the sale of a strip of land next to it did. I feel for the family that own that particular business, and I can understand why they would give up. Look at the current situation with New Dunes at La Poulante. However did that get passed as a restaurant? We now know that business has failed, and we heard yesterday that the planning application for holiday lets in a very small cafe has been rejected. What happens now? I hope that this won't become the folly of the West. Where we had a very successful and much used beach concession that had to close when the restaurant opened, we now have nothing. And there's a whole fiasco over the public toilets, which again, nobody seems able to get to the bottom of, no pun intended. The old La Poulante pub has been recently sold, and the very popular family restaurant on the site is currently closed. There are now no refreshment spots on that corner of the island. What will planning decide to do about that? Should an application for change of use be made? More holiday lets or private accommodation that parishioners don't support? And I'm sure my colleague Deputy Tadayer will address the strength of feeling about developments in that corner of our island. A lot of people literally turned up and literally formed a line in the sand. The whole point of an island plan is that, a plan. In the absence of a cohesive plan, the piecemeal approach which is evolving risks duplication or loss of services and a total lack of understanding of community needs. Earlier this week, we saw a classic example of where the framework would have provided some direction, the debacle over the recycling services, which may have been avoided if the department had been better informed of the community reliance on the bring banks, which ended up with a proposition from Deputy Tadier, which I, of course, support. In the comments presented by the Council of Ministers, it stated that the current focus is to develop part of the water resource management strategy, and specifically to consider options for the water supply and any associated requirement for infrastructure enhancements, expansion or provision. How can this be completed for the West of Ireland without a framework? It's putting the proverbial horse before the cart. What is more concerning is that I believe the Minister admitted at the last hearing of the Environment, Housing and Infrastructure panel that he's actually unable to move forward with the water resources management strategy in this term, and so he will bring forward a plan for the strategy. A structured planning framework is essential for effective community development, avoiding overlaps and ensuring resource allocation. It also communicates a commitment to sustainability and growth, attracting investment. Prioritising this framework now will complete a significant part of the evidence base for the next island plan, enabling focused decision-making and proactive risk management. The Minister for the Environment notes 11 pieces of work yet to commence before the next island plan is delivered, and tells me that the West of Ireland framework is not a priority. It's delay. I feel in some ways that we were being fobbed off. Priority is something that's regarded as more important than other things. It's an item or task is given precedence and needs to be dealt with or focused on before anything else. Priorities are things that demand our immediate attention and effort due to their urgency or importance. A great deal of investment has flowed into St Helier for regeneration and public realm, and continues to be so, and I don't begrudge St Helier. It's our capital and needs investment. But it is not acceptable and simply not good enough for St Brelard and the West to be ignored, given the commitment made in the Bridging Island Plan. So finally, sir, I consider the West of Ireland planning framework to be more important than some of the other things that are happening, and therefore priority. And I urge members to support this amendment, particularly the Western deputies and Connaught, whose parishioners deserve a better service from government. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Is the amendment seconded? Thank you. Minister for the Environment.
Thank you, sir. And right at the outset, can I say that the government have found the money to do this work, and we are accepting this amendment. I did tell the deputy beforehand, a bit like me, she's been trying to modify her speech while she speaks, maybe, and I'm going to do the same. But I'm grateful that she spoke about the island plan, because I want to start my contribution to this part of the debate by reminding members, should they be in any doubt, about the significance of the island plan and how important it is to make sure that we have it based on sound evidence. Members are going to know that we have a plan-led planning system here in Jersey, and that means that planning applications that are in accordance with the policies in the island plan should be approved. Similarly, those that do not accord with the plan should be refused, unless there's a compelling and overriding case not to do so. It's also the key tool by which we assess what development needs we have across the island over the next planned period, and it provides a mechanism as to how we might best meet those needs. It's not, therefore, just about regulation. It's also about placemaking, and it's about shaping the island for the future. In this respect, doing some work to assess what opportunities might exist in the west of the island to help meet the island's future development needs, whether that is for housing or for more opportunities to support economic development at places like the airport or Lake Kenneveigh and Red Houses, is important work. This is perhaps even more significant if we take the long view and consider that successive recent island plans, as the deputies just highlighted, have generally focused the meeting of the island's development needs on the town of St Helier. So it's clear that Kenneveigh serves as the island's secondary centre. It has a significant proportion of housing, it's a significant retail centre, and it enjoys a range of community facilities, including a new secondary school, a leisure centre, country parks at Lake Creux and Port Marquet, and now relocated health services at the site of the former Kenneveigh School. Whilst it has a lot going for it, we all know it also has some challenges, perhaps represented most evidently by a physically tired shopping precinct and issues associated with the closure of local shops and banking services. So undertaking this work on the west of our island will seek to gain a better understanding of the potential that the west of Ireland might have to accommodate future development that the island might need, and perhaps provide some relief for St Helier. It might also allow us to look at what other elements of community infrastructure might be required to support more development there. Undertaking this work by my department next year will inform and support the development of policies and proposals to help realise the opportunity for growth and regeneration in the west of the island. So I'm sure that we can all appreciate and recognise that this work, focused on the Kennervay and the west, will be valuable to undertake. That said, there are of course other areas of the island that would also benefit from more detailed assessment and consideration of their planning needs. And the Bridging Island Plan also highlights the need for similar work to be undertaken in other places, such as Five Oaks and St Billard's Bay, which has already been mentioned. There is a list of many things to do in advance of the next island plan and to prepare for it. In this respect, much of my current focus has been on improving the efficiency and effectiveness of the planning service. I think there's a widespread recognition that the planning service has been through a rough time, and improvements need to and are being made to provide the island with a better planning service. This is a priority for this government, and the focus of attention in helping me to support the service is already bearing some fruit. I had at this point, sir, intended to talk about some of my other priorities, including water, which is my number one issue that I want to try to solve as best I can between now and the next election. The Deputy mentioned it. I am actually making a lot more progress than she suggested. I won't be able to do 100%, but I will be doing 90% before the next election. I also wanted to mention, sir, and I will do it very much more briefly than I intended to, what strategies we have in place for land use requirements for the island, how we might be dealing with liquid and solid waste into the future, and other issues that we will have to address, like the supply of aggregates, and how we might deal with glass houses. And obviously not all this is going to fall to my planning team, and I'll need to talk to other ministers about taking this work forward. But in order of brevity and to move the debate forward, I'm going to stop there and just say I am very happy to accept this amendment. It is important work out of the west of the island to see where we might make improvements and changes. And I'll leave it there, sir, and ask members to support this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Constable St Helier.
Thank you, sir. The amendment's been accepted. We therefore don't want a long debate, but there are just a couple of things I wanted to say. First of all, I wanted to commend Deputy Miles on an excellent speech. I thought she really set out the case for this work. And as a former resident of St Oban, and I still have my boat in the harbour, I welcomed her comments. I just want to say two things, really, sir. First of all, members may remember in the Bridging Island Plan debate that I expressed some concern about developing Kennervay and the idea of a second town and the impact it might have on St Helier. And it's interesting that Deputy Luce, the Planning Minister, refers to this offering relief to St Helier. And members may have noticed that in recent years I've become a little less generous in accepting the weight of the island's housing development in St Helier, because I've begun to say it's time for other parishes to take a share of that load. So you can't simply carry on increasing the housing load in St Helier without town cramming. So when the Planning Minister speaks about relief for St Helier, what I would urge him to think about is that the big relief that particularly businesses in town and shops in town require, and the thing that will concern them about developing Lake Kennervay as a shopping destination, is that, of course, you can go to Kennervay and park for free. I do not want to see a situation where people start choosing to go to Deputy Miles's end of the island for their shopping trips rather than coming into town. And that's why I continue to press for improvements in the parking arrangements in St Helier, so that people who want a bit more choice, a bit more buzz in the street will continue to come to St Helier. And I acknowledge that Deputy Miles doesn't want to see any diminution in the public realm in St Helier and what the parish offers to the island. But my second point, and the one I feel more strongly about, is that for as long as I've been a member of the States, I've seen ministers throw money gaily at master plans. The shelves in the former planning department must have groaned under the weight of master plans. I remember one in particular when the then planning minister didn't really want to progress the Millennium Town Park, so he commissioned a master plan for the area by a firm called Edor. It cost an eye-watering £250,000. It was a fat document, and it ended up proposing that the current Millennium Town Park would be enhanced by building 2 rows of housing blocks down either side of the space. Can you imagine how much town park there would have been left? It's small now, but it would have been much smaller if Edor had had its way. And so my concern, sir, and what I urged my fellow members of the west of the island is spend this money wisely. Spend it on the kind of practical improvements that Deputy Miles was talking about. Get together as elected representatives of the West with our skilled and experienced officers from our policy unit and our planners and work out what you want to do. You don't need to spend £100,000, and that does be the beginning of it, on a UK firm of consultants to come in and advise you what to do in your area. But the less money you spend on consultants, the more money you can spend on improving Lake Kennebae and the other areas of the West. And that's my advice, sir, and I hope that it may be useful. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Conatab. Conatab St Peter.
Thank you, sir. Likewise, I fully support this amendment. I recall that just prior to the Bridging Island plan, I was asked by the media for my thoughts, and I did fully support at that time and still do the creation of a second hub in the west of the island and the regeneration of certain areas of Lake Kennebae. I must, however, correct Deputy Miles on one item in her excellent speech, and that was about the wooden bollards on the 5 Mile Road. In fact, all 3 parishes were in complete agreement, and I went to a on-site meeting representing the 3 constables, where there were also members of the National Trust, and they raised objections to the wooden bollards, saying they were far too high and out of keeping for the area. I believe there was also an article in the Evening Post along the same lines. We did point out that the wooden bollards are actually used throughout the island. There are a number of them on St Peter's Valley, for instance, and they're quite in keeping there. But it was sad that the views of the National Trust appeared to outweigh the views of the parishes, and therefore nothing was done about the parking. I would like to revisit it because it is dangerous. You have children that often, it's happened several times where children come out from behind the parked cars who also park on the footpath. I know all 3 constables were in agreement to introducing not a complete parking ban, but some restrictions to make it safer. And we certainly were in favour of the wooden bollard. So I don't know where that came from, but it certainly wasn't the parishes that scuppered that. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Conatab. Deputy Moore.
Thank you, sir, and I appreciate that members will not wish to take too much time over this, as we have reached a happy conclusion in the government's acceptance. However, I would like to make a couple of comments as a representative of a Western constituency, and also I think it's important to ask the government and remind them that they have a duty of candour to explain to us what has changed overnight, because just yesterday we heard the Minister speak against this amendment. We heard the Chief Minister mocking it and the requirement for £100,000. His tone was certainly mocking, sir, and of course the comments rejected.
Sir, may I just...
Well, only if
Sir, no, I don't give way. I stand by what I said. There was a clear mocking of this amendment yesterday from the Chief Minister, which was not very Chief Ministerly, if I could say so. So, sir, what has changed overnight? What deal has been done behind closed doors? And could the Chief Minister perhaps address that in his speech? I was really pleased to hear the Minister speak in favour of this very simple amendment, and Deputy Miles gave an excellent speech. I know that plans are not very popular in this government, and it's an easy line and a popular line to repeat, and the Constable of St Helier has very clearly, I think, stated why plans, and master plans in particular, have lost favour amongst certain sectors of the public because they have not been dealt with properly. However, a good plan can, in fact, be a boost for business. It can replace the fiscal stimulus that we're not offering businesses by bringing people together, engaging with our public, listening to what they want to see in and around their area, and helping businesses to understand that and then respond to it. Businesses spend sometimes millions of pounds going through processes, designs, and to invest in facilities, such as the plans for the water splash that the Deputy spoke of for St One's Bay. And the frustration that those businesses find them experience after making that significant investment in the planning process, only to be knocked back and carried on for many, many years sometimes, that just simply whittles away any funds that they'd set aside for that investment. It delivers nothing, or it means that what is delivered is a lesser result than what was originally intended. That is not good for anybody. It's not good for members of our community. It's not good for our tourists. And it is not good for our business people who decide to maybe go and make their investments elsewhere rather than investing in their facilities in the island, which is what we all want to see. So I have many points to make, but I think I simply wanted to add that as a new point, that having a clear plan and enacting a clear plan can be really good for business. And I hope that delivering a clear plan for the west of the island will help to encourage investment in our facilities from both the public sector and the private. And I'm delighted to hear that the government has finally decided to accept this amendment.
Thank you, Deputy. David Morrell.
Thank you, sir. In my mind, I want to say, first of all, I am delighted that the amendment has been accepted, and I was delighted with Deputy Miles' speech. There was barely a word I did not agree with in that speech. As someone, except, as I whispered to Deputy Miles, missing out the parish of St Lawrence, when it comes to those parishes which regularly use Lake Ennevé. It's not just St Villard, St One, St Mary, St Peter. St Lawrence does too, and I have a funny feeling residents of St John may as well. It is the town that never was, in my mind, Lake Ennevé. And I don't know if when you go back to the 50s and 60s, the kind of development of Lake Ennevé, I don't know if ever there was a plan. But to me as an islander, and I speak purely as someone who's lived most of his life in this island, and my view of Lake Ennevé is that it's a big suburban area. It's not really a town. It's more, in my mind, suburbia. But it should be a town. It needs to be a town, but it's never been planned as a town. And I think that does need to change. One of the benefits I thought of, what I think we are all realising that the Bridging Island Plan is really a failed island plan. And but one of the benefits I did see in that was the idea of beginning to treat Lake Ennevé as a town. And I think that would be hugely beneficial to the residents of the area. I think because it will create a centre, a gathering point, a point of focus, which in my mind, just as an islander, is something that has never been the case. It's never had a point of focus. If any, it is Lake Ennevé Parade. But what is Lake Ennevé Parade when you look at it? It's a very big car park, surrounded by a few buildings and a few shops. And I don't say that to demean it. I've used it many, many times, but it could be so much more than it is. And I appreciate all the issues around private ownership. I do, and I know that's difficult. But when Deputy Miles then speaks about issues like private ownership, etc., and criticises government for never really having to wanting to grapple with these issues. I have to agree. I think successive governments have not wanted to grapple with those issues. They are knotty, they are difficult, but we do need to. Because I think the island would benefit hugely from the Kennebec becoming more of a town and less of suburbia. But we do have to plan our way out of it to some extent. And it is interesting, Deputy of the Constable St Helier has, to my mind, often called for an all-of-town master plan. So I know he's not that against master plans. But I do know that the danger of master plans is that they happen and they get put on a shelf. They are a paper-based exercise at the end of the day. But I think for Lake Kennebec, we do need a kind of guiding light, a focal point. There was just one other thing in Deputy Miles's speech which I wanted to highlight because I strongly agree. The Constable of St Peter may or may not agree, I don't know. But the deputy mentioned the surrounding area of the airport potentially being used for economic development, and that's something which I strongly agree with. I think that is an area just on the margins of the airport area, basically. I think that is an area we can have some land set aside for economic development, because one of the failings of the Bridging Island Plan is that it gave us no economic development area. It's a massive problem for the island, and as a result of that, we're seeing commercial prices rising and rising, and it becomes more difficult then to start businesses in the island. So I'm fully supportive of this, and I'm delighted that as a government we're able to accept it. Yes, I will call it a day there, so to everyone's relief. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Brenner.
Thank you, sir. I'll join those members who congratulated Deputy Miles on her speech. And I think what I particularly liked about it was there was passion. Passion for something that she believes in. And I think that contrasts really. I don't want to be negative about the government. I'm very pleased that the Minister has accepted this amendment, and late is better than never. But I do recall we had debates, we had question session in the States where we tried to put this higher up the agenda, and it didn't find favour then. But it is better late than never. And I'm glad to see it reinstated, and I'm glad to see the Minister speaking with conviction about the need for it. Several people have picked up there's been a rather negative attitude from this government, I think, in general, about anything that smacks of strategic planning or which has consultation in it and so on. It's portrayed as just talk when the focus is on delivery. And I think Deputy Miles' speech made the very strong case, as did Deputy Jeune yesterday in a different context, talking about the accounting methods and so on, about the way that strategic thinking, vision and planning are central to effective delivery. That is what gives you effective delivery. There is one, I accept that there's been a long record of failure around master plans and so on, but we're not prisoners of the past. We hold our own future in our hands. And the key difference about this particular master plan is that it is part of a process described in legislation to bring forward an island plan. It doesn't just sit on a shelf and vanish, because it has to be referenced in the next island plan. It is the basis of the next island plan. And given that the island plan is going to be extended, as the Minister has said, it is doubly important that we have a pipeline of work, consistent, steady pipeline of work that will prepare us for that, so that we don't arrive suddenly with a need to do an island plan and a whole backlog of work that needs to be done at record-breaking pace. That's when you end up bringing in lots of consultants and so on, because you have suddenly got to do a huge amount in a short space of time. So the pipeline of work is important. So a couple of points of substance. I think this question of what do we mean by a second urban centre in the Kennebec, which Deputy Morell raised in his speech, is fundamental. Nobody knows what it means. Is it a town? Is it just about developing more facilities? Is it to be a commuter belt for town, for St Helier, with just a few shops? You know, these are fundamental questions that can be addressed and should be addressed. The closure of the branch bank recently, leaving us with just one bank there, is a really big issue, and it would be seen completely differently, that decision, if there was a planning framework which boosted the notion of Le Canavay as a centre for these kind of facilities. That with sufficient interest from government that the bank might want to go and talk to government before they make a decision like that, because they could see that there was commitment to that region. They might want to say, we could share facilities with you, perhaps. Are you interested in a shared facility where other banks or maybe the government could hold a building? Those things would be different, I think. I do want to talk about Le Creux briefly. There is it is emblematic to me of the potential of the opportunities that we sometimes miss out on here. There is an extraordinary opportunity at Le Creux because the Bowls Club, which used to occupy it, is no longer wants to run that site. And at the very same time, the farmers have given up the tenancy on the fields that make up the country park around it. That creates a terrific opportunity to reinvent, reimagine what we do on that site. A huge site, many, many fields, and a set of facilities, of community facilities, embryonic, I would say, of what could be so much more. We have an astronomy facility there, we have the pump track, we have the Bowls Club building. There is so much that could happen there. And there is so much energy from the community to try and get involved in it. All they need is that commitment from government to do something there, to say, we'll start a process to see what works here. And, you know, and I think so often that all we ask for is that little extra thing from government to say we're behind this. And so I think Le Creux, this amendment allows us to start that process of engagement, potential for a master plan for that area. And I think all we need to do is release the energy that would come from that. So I would echo the comments that there are so many opportunities that will come from this. I think it's a really good piece of work. It has to happen anyway. Let's get on with it. And it's great that the government has seen that. And I really am feeling much more optimistic as a result of that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Deputy. Colin St Saviour.
Thank you, sir. I will be brief, sir. Yes, I do support this amendment, sir, and I'm delighted it's been accepted. Canavay is, as the Deputy Master has pointed out, is a very run-down area, but I appreciate the problems with it's in private ownership, but I'm sure arrangements could be made, and it's the whole area does certainly need brightening up. I'll make a comment regarding planning. I think mention was made of a public house and the neighbours didn't want it converted, if I heard that correctly. But tastes are changing, money is tight, and people are not drinking as much as they used to, which could be a good thing. So is it right to compel someone to keep a business open that is no longer economically viable? Talking of which, Canavay has recently lost one of its banks. Again, more and more people are banking online. Not myself, being an oldie, I don't trust banking online, and I know many people, including seniors, don't trust banking online. In St Saviour, we had 4 banks. We had one in Georgetown, Milady Farm, and 2 at Five Oaks, which not only service the parish of St Saviour, but also our friends that are north and east of us. With 3 of them had car parks, so it was very handy. Now, if you're dealing in cash in any shape or form, you have to come into St Helier. So if they try to close your last bank, please fight like a wildcat, because it will go, and everything will be in central in St Helier, the way things are going. But I'll leave it at that, sir. I said I'm delighted that the amendment's been approved, and please spend it wisely.
Thank you, Conor St John.
Thank you, sir. And I too am happy to support this amendment, and the question was asked was where was the money found, sir? Well, working with colleagues, we found a solution to delay some of our programmes so that we can do this important work. A public realm, sir, isn't limited to St Helier. If you go around the island, you can see the great work that was done at St Albans, St Mary's. That may be questionable in some people's eyes, but a lot of public realm work was done in St Mary's, St Lawrence, Trinity more recently, and more recently in St John. Sir, I would encourage the Deputy to look at not only this plan, but also to work with parishioners. Deputy Renoff spoke about the energy within the parish. So I think it was about 16 years ago I became the Vice Chair of the Committee Rural de Saint-Jean. That is a committee that is elected at a parish assembly for a 3-year term, and we have contributed to the last 2 Bridging Island plans. So looking at what can we do as a parish to contribute to the island. So I'm really pleased to have been a member of that group that supported rezoning fields for affordable homes and for right-sized properties, sir. I'm also proud of that group because now, probably 25 years after trying, we now have a playing field for the school. And again, that group of parishioners supported the rezoning of a field for a playing field and also some much needed affordable homes. Members may be interested to know that the Constable is not the chair of that committee. In fact, the Connétable is an ex officio member of that committee. Sir, I'm due to meet with the deputies to discuss Le Creux next week because there is opportunity there both for recreational and sporting facilities. Sir, Deputy Miles mentioned mains drains, sir. Mains drains is not just an issue in the west of the island, sir. Sadly, mains drains and mains water is an issue right across the island and something that we are trying to work with, and we'll see in this budget there's significant investment to try and get that work going further. The Deputy also mentioned about how good it would be to have a bus. Well, I'm delighted to tell the Deputy that I've been working since elected as Minister for Infrastructure to get a bus to go from the east to the west, sir. Now that we have the Enid Kenno Centre at St Bullard's, many parishioners would find it much easier to get on one bus rather than 2, and I hope to be able to bring that to fruition next year. The toilets at La Pullent were also mentioned, so we're in a legal process to ensure that those toilets are open. When you look at Kennerbay Precinct, sir, 3.5 years ago when I became Constable, St John's Precinct had 2 empty shops and a third considering closing. So I've worked with those businesses. It's privately owned, the development. I've worked with the business owners, and I'm delighted to say we have a thriving precinct. I'd invite members to come and look at the facilities there on a Saturday, sir, but I warn them they may struggle to park. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Connétable. Deputy Joseph.
Thank you, sir. I'll be very, very brief. I absolutely welcome the amendment brought by Deputy Miles, and I'm delighted that the government has accepted it. I think the question that I, as other members, will have is what's changed overnight, and I do think a minister should speak as to what has changed in terms of priorities of this. I wanted to bring an amendment, but I apologise to my constituents and my constable. I said I was going to bring forward an identical amendment for the Five Oaks Master Plan because Five Oaks needs it. We've got money in the parish from the Connétable Fund to make a real and meaningful difference in terms of housing and as a result of some parish assemblies, some excellent initiatives that the Constable wants to pursue in terms of community facilities. But I regret that we can't do that because there's no plan for Five Oaks. Five Oaks at St Saviour is, like St Bullard's, a densely populated, heavy traffic area. Infrastructure are public spaces, many of which are looked after by St Saviour, some of which is done by the states. So I understand the importance of planning. I have also some memory for the Constable of St Helier. The EDOR plan was done in 1995. That was before even I was in this assembly, 1995, sir. So it was a long time ago, and so to criticise something that was, I think, is it 30 years? I think it's not quite right. I know I ditched the EDOR plan when I was unfortunately given President of Environment and Public Services. So this is the last amendment of this this budget that has been happily, warmly congratulate Deputy Miles and the other deputies and Deputy Tadia for doing it. Of course, I feel rather bad because Five Oaks is, I didn't manage to get my amendment in because I was trying to get mine in and I didn't do it, and I'm sorry. But I'd just like to understand what we have to do to get the government to prioritise and deliver plans for areas that are equally, and I no, this is not I want a win-win. I want a win for Lake Henvey, and I'd like a win for my constable and our St Saviour deputies that are not members of the executive to get a plan for our Five Oaks, because it really, really matters, sir. And what the constable said was absolutely right. I hope that 2 minutes is not time lost or wasted.
Thank you, Deputy. Colin Iverson Brillard.
Thank you, sir. I do appreciate Deputy Miles trying to prioritise a West of Ireland planning framework, and I'm sure that the concept will have the support of most political representatives from the west of the island and others. I too thank her for her brilliant speech, which summed up relevant issues in our parish and what might be described as her credible wish list. We've all got those, sir, and together I'm sure we can achieve a better place to live for parishioners. Whilst I agree with some of the challenges the Deputy puts forward, there are some that are easy wins, but others that are regrettably maybe a bit more difficult and time-consuming to resolve. The principal challenge, sir, in my view, is the condition of the Kenway Parade, as has been alluded to by others. Albeit, sir, in the full knowledge that it is home to some 38 parishioners, either as tenants or flying freeholders. My researchers, sir, have indicated that the complex is owned by a company which purchased in 2006. The residential apartments, as I mentioned before, people's homes, are in multiple ownerships, those 38 apartments and in addition 33 garages. Most of the commercial units are let, save 2 units in the precinct which were sold in 2021. There is inevitably a degree of turnover dictated by the individual circumstances of the commercial tenants. The catchment area, coupled with parking provision, make it very attractive from a commercial point of view, but public information indicates that whilst the owners have a loan on the property, the cost is well covered by rental income, and with a surplus added would, in my view, give them no incentive to carry out any refurbishment or regeneration. Redevelopment of the whole site would require the buyout of the numerous owners and result in the rehousing of 38 occupiers. This would be a very complex and costly exercise, and the development appraisal just wouldn't stack up given the acquisition costs and the rebuild costs and the fact that you would be unlikely to achieve higher rentals. I was, in fact, sir, told that the precinct is performing better than Queen Street in terms of occupancy. Although that sounds negative, sir, notwithstanding that, circumstances may change with the owners. Who knows? We just have to wait and see. Improvements to the open spaces and car parking areas could benefit from some soft landscaping, but this would need to be funded by commercial tenants and apartment owners. Surely, sir, I don't think it can be for government or indeed the parish to be putting funding into a privately owned complex. Notwithstanding that, so I would be keen to see improvements to the site, but I think we can be sure that it won't be happening soon unless, as I alluded before, there is a change of ownership. We know, sir, that the sports centre needs an upgrade. We discussed maintenance earlier in this debate, and that will, I hope, be factored into future sports budgets. We're quite well off, sir, in St Brillard for cycling and walking provision, apart from La Route de Montmort, and discussions are underway with the infrastructure department on that, and we will just have to see what we can achieve. I'm grateful for the infrastructure department for looking at these areas, although I have to say I do anticipate some revolt, if I can use that word, from the residents of the Noirmont area when the road is resurfaced towards the end of January and the turmoil that will ensue. The St. Bernard's Bay Improvement Plan is advancer, but its completion is unfunded. We know that, and I'm sure Deputy Scott won't allow this situation to persist for much longer. I'm aware of Deputy Renault's ambitions for Les Creux, and I'm pleased to have heard him outline those. But the harsh reality is that they're not funded, and there doesn't seem to be any funding in sight. It's fair to say, sir, that residents of St. Bernard are diverse in their needs, and we do have to do what we can to evolve towards a changing society. So let's see whether the matters alluded to can be advanced, as the Deputy suggests, without too much further delay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Colin Tard. Deputy Tellier.
Thank you, sir. We've had a lot of criticism of government, and I'm not one to shy away from that normally, but it seems to me that they've done us all a favour, not least the St. Bernard representatives, and I think they need to actually be thanked rather than criticised for, first of all, accepting this. And I don't know who the movers necessarily were behind the scenes, but clearly there was a pragmatic approach taken here. There's a recognition that what's being asked for here for the work at Le Quennevay is not just something that will benefit the immediate residents or even the representatives of that area, but it's actually for everybody in Jersey because it is widely used. So, of course, and I do add my thanks to Deputy Miles and the others who have spoken so far, because we do really stand shoulder to shoulder, sir, in this proposition. And I'm also minded of the fact that I'm really grateful as perhaps a longer-serving deputy for initially Le Quennevay and Lemoy, and then now for St. Bernard's. It's really great to have colleagues within the parish that I can work with constructively, and that goes for all of the representatives from the constable to the other three deputies, because there was a time when I very much felt myself as the, I'm not going to say the sole deputy, but I considered myself very much, and maybe I was considered as the MP for Le Quennevay and Lemoy for many years. And it was very difficult to try and get things done when you had just two deputies effectively representing Le Quennevay out of an assembly of 53 members. Now we have, of course, the people of Le Quennevay, Lemoy and all of St. Bernard can call on 4 deputies and a constable out of 49 members in this assembly. So they are better represented in that respect. But it's not enough, and it's great when other members come on board and share the vision that we all have, sir. It's been a wide-ranging debate so far, but I'm going to restrict it to what's on the paper today, in particular Le Quennevay, because that's what we're discussing. I can remember, of course, what Le Quennevay used to be like when I grew up there. I remember Pickwick's, I remember Panicos, I remember the fishmonger, I remember roosters. And if you just went a little bit further up the road, you had Machons. Machons is where I had my first morning paper round at the age of 12. And if that sounds outrageous by today's standards, I actually had my JEP paper round when I was still at primary school, so I don't think anyone necessarily believes me. I won't go on in that vein because it will start to sound like a Monty Python sketch if I say how hard it was when we were growing up back in those days. But I also remember we had the big Larish and the small Larish. I don't know if other people called it that. But the big Larishes is where Waitrose is now, and we would walk up from Don Farm, because that was quite far away on a Saturday or after school, and you'd go there and you'd look at the CDs down below and you'd have the main store. And of course the little Larish was Larish, let's get our teeth in straight. We called it Grand Fair, and that's where we'd take our bottles back. And just to show how young I am, we actually got 10 full pence for every bottle we returned. It wasn't anything to do with shillings or anything like that. So how the world has changed, how Le Quennevay has very much changed, and in some ways it's not all got better, because in terms of the environmentalism, and we've had some comments from the Constable of St Helier about parking, I'll get onto that in a moment. You know, that idea of taking your bottle back, those are some great wisdom that we don't have anymore. But we're not here to talk about recycling or the Battle of Flowers. So let's get back on track. The key thing here is that the money in itself is not going to be a silver bullet. We know that. This is really a starting point to try and focalise some of the energy and get resources and people thinking. I'm also really grateful to what Deputy Miles has done already in the short term that she's been a St Bullard representative. She's gathered a lot of support from within the community, from different sectors of people who want to work on projects. So I think of the beautiful St Bullard project. Lots of people who may not have any kind of political aspirations themselves necessarily, but are invested in the community, either from because they have shops there, but they live there, and they love the area, which we all do. So I think that's a really great thing to do, but we do need to think outside the box, and it's also sometimes quite easy to think it's all futile or that it's somebody else's fault. So if we look at the precinct, I mean, that was a great quote, I thought, from the Economic Development Minister, is that Kennervay precinct is basically just a car park with loads of shops and buildings around it. Well, you could probably say the same about St Helier. It's just one big car park with lots of shops, people living there, and parks and everything. And maybe the island is just one big car park, who knows? But actually, when we look at the wider Le Kennervay, because I want the message to get out there that this is both visionary, but actually Le Kennervay isn't completely broken either. So Le Kennervay St Bullard is a great place to live for so many people for so many reasons. It's really sought after because it's got all those facilities on its doorstep. People feel they don't need to leave to go to town. But it's also got the green backdrop, it's got the beaches, it's got that beautiful Norman church down in the bay. And if we want to talk about actually coming up to the Liberation 80 year next year, let's look about how we can also tie in some of the great history that we've got for the area. We know that there's an occupation history at the top of the hill, but down the bay where, of course, Claude Cahoon, Marcel Moore lived. And we know this year we celebrate on the 8th of December, the 70th anniversary of Lucy Schwab, who was Claude Cahoon. She died 70 years ago after leaving a massive legacy, not just in Jersey, but she was a really inspirational woman, along with her partner, Suzanne Malherbe. And that kind of thing needs to be commemorated. And maybe I look at the Constable and my fellow deputies, would there be any appetite for maybe renaming a road down there somewhere, or code-naming a road after Claude Cahoon and Marcel Moore to remember what they did? So there is a way, I think, to talk up the area generally and also to invest in it. But will we be open to maybe some imaginative thinking? So the first thing I think we can do, now that governments, I think, come on board with this, is that in addition to the money, we could also look at, and I have spoken to the Social Security Minister, she's keen to maybe get involved with having some kind of CLS offering in Le Kennervay, whether it's on a permanent basis or on a pop-up basis, where we've already seen the good work that's going on at Communicare with the library. And I know that different deputies use different areas for their surgeries, for example. And these are facilities which can be enhanced. They're already well loved, but sometimes they need a bit of investment and TLC, and sometimes a bit of different way of doing things. So I think we need to be open to that. Let's look specifically at Le Kennervay precinct. It is in multiple ownership, which doesn't make it an easy solution for anything to be done. But I know that when I was briefly at Culture as an assistant minister, I did reach out to, I think it was Voice and Hunter, who were the administrators at the time, for that area, and then High Tide Investment, as we know, are the ones who own the shops there generally, and maybe one or two of the apartments, which otherwise are in private ownership. And they did say to me that they shared the frustrations because they had been working on plans for the area, but they hadn't actually found the support for it. So it does work both ways. I think if we're to find a solution to this area, it needs to be really a three-way partnership between possibly government, but definitely the community and also the owners of that area, to say, what is it that you would like to do with the area that actually ties in with the wider vision that we have? I think there's great potential there. We do accept that there needs to be parking, because people come from afar and near. A lot of people actually walk up to the precinct, you know. That's the great thing about that area. You can walk up right from almost the airport and from Lemoy to Le Kennervay precinct. But we need to say, what is the vision there? The parking underneath, could that somehow be raised? Could there be a way to landscape it so that it's a lot greener, so that the parking is maybe hidden and more practical, and that the top area actually feels more like a park where you want to sit out, have a coffee, much more European potentially. But it will require some imaginative thinking. And so one example is that when the old Freedom Surf Shop was up for sale, I did think to myself, and I did put out some feelers, would there be any appetite for the parish or for the public to acquire that as a building. I didn't get any immediate support for that, but it could have been a lost opportunity, and we must make sure that when there are other opportunities that come up, and it could be something, and I'm just throwing this out there, it might be a silly idea, but it might be workable. Could it be that we actually look to acquire some of those properties as and when they come up and form some kind of community trust that actually gets to the point where the rents are kept in moderation? And I always look towards the market, because the market in town is a great example. There tend to be very few shops. There are very established businesses there. And they're established because they can afford to have the continuity, because they've got security of tenure, and that they know generally that they'll be able to afford their rents. And they're not all selling, you know, they're not multinational stores that we see in the market. They're family-run stores, generational stores that provide those services. So in terms of looking back, I know this is about looking forward, but it would be nice if we had some of those basics in Lekeneve. They don't even necessarily need to be in the precinct. But when we talk about fishmongers, butchers, the hot bread shop, which I forgot to mention earlier, those kind of bakeries, those are the basics that I think we always need in any community. And I look to the Constable of St John because I think he has done a great job, and St John's has done a great job generally in generating that area, and there is so much potential. So this is about being positive, and I'll leave it there, sir. 10 minutes is by far sufficient for this kind of debate where a proposition has been already accepted, but I add my voice to the members of St Brelard in asking all members that this isn't the end of the matter, this is the beginning, and we will rely on members' support for the good work that we want to do now and into the future in Lekeneve.
Thank you, Deputy. Does any other member wish to speak on the amendment? Deputy Scott.
Thank you, sir. As a deputy of St Brelard, I'm glad the Minister found some money down the back of the sofa for this particular proposition of my fellow deputy of St Brelard. I note the sofa was not in the Cabinet Office. Also, that the proposed improvements for this route to Noirmont are still being done on a shoestring that is being strung out. I thank Deputy Miles for bringing this proposition and welcome some planning policy attention now being given to the west of the island to help bring forward the proposition brought by Deputy Tadier, whose efforts I also thank too. And I congratulate Deputy Miles and the Constable of St Brelard for the actions they have taken to improve enjoyment of our beautiful St Brelard. And thank you, and thank Deputy Tadier for his conversations with the Minister for Social Security to look into the provisions of the hub. I don't feel widely celebratory about this, the acceptance of this, the funding of this proposition for a number of reasons, and I will explain why. And in that respect, I might well refer back to the speech of the Constable of St Helier. For many years, I have acted as chair of the St Brelard's Bay Association, and before then, I was a member of a parish working group that was looking into the delivery of a development plan that had been proposed for the St Brelard's Bay. And these voluntary roles have obliged me to engage with the planning system more than I ever could have wished in any role or walk of life. The role of the parish working group was constrained by existing planning policy from day one. Indeed, the Minister for Environment at the time publicly criticised its members in this State's Assembly for seeking to change that policy. He is the Minister for the Environment now, which makes for an interesting dynamic. In Kenefe, one of our elderly constituents struggles with the stairs, but she cannot find anywhere in the parish to move into, and she does want to stay within the parish. The parish needs some changes of policy, including to enable more sheltered housing to be built. So what should come first? The change of policy or the development of the planning framework? Now, the Minister for Environment may not agree with me, but I and many of my constituents, potential developers, and a number of planning consultants regard The planning policy system has broken. And rather than continuing with it, I suggest we States members should be looking to replace or reform it radically. I don't mean twiddling around the sides of the system in accordance with the McKinnon report and how planning officers actually review applications or proposals to make them more productive in applying the system. I've seen a number of Planning Officers Society reports over the years recommending measures to make outcomes from engaging with the system more certain and more productive. But I actually suggest it's the planning policy system itself that is unproductive and that it is seriously damaging our economy. And in fact, part of the problem is that it refers to a system that is used in the UK that also has not been hugely economically productive in recent years. And a revitalised St Brelard needs a revitalised economy. You can't force private landholders to develop if they don't have money, or shop holders to set up shop in an area where people actually aren't benefiting from a vibrant economy. I salute the members of the Planning Committee who have done their best to counter some of the absurdities and injustices produced by our current planning policies as the system as it is. It has a scope for uncertainty, making developers unwilling to sink more funds in developments when they cannot be reasonably certain that they will be approved. And the reason for this is that it is a system that is policy and guidance-based rather than code-based. Policy officers will argue that the benefit of this is flexibility. It certainly produces plenty of work for planning consultants who don't work that cheaply, so I suppose it's got a contribution to the economy there, but it has much more pernicious effects. And people much more experienced than me in attending planning committee meetings would have observed how the same planning consultant can argue for or against support for similar planning applications by selecting different groups of policies and speaking to them, and that planning officers can do likewise to an extent. And let's talk about process. How did Le Kenefay become the target for proposals to designate it a secondary urban centre compared to, say, St Peter's Village? Was that with the choice of its residents, or was that a decision imposed upon them from up high? Meanwhile, in the continent and in the Antipodes, local communities have worked with local governments to develop codes that enable development within clear spatial and design parameters without requiring planning applications at all. Imagine that, sir. I have emailed the Minister for the Environment requesting that the consultation on the next island plan ask about consultees' appetite for neighbourhood plans and codes. I have not yet heard back from him. If it's not to be consulted upon, then I will look into discussing with him a proposition to introduce neighbourhood plans that operate as codes in accordance with my manifesto commitments on which I was elected by constituents in St Brelard. Although such codes may take more work to develop, they help to create clear vision and preserve neighbourhood characters and dispense with the need for planning officers to process planning applications that fall within agreed design and spatial parameters. In the meantime, I remain aware that the Western Planning Framework, if proceeded with, would essentially produce guidance within a policy structure many would regard as flawed. It is unclear where the West of Island Planning Framework will be in the Minister's list of priorities, when he has, as he already has mentioned, many priorities. And I would be sorry if the work he has initiated on the protection of trees in response to another proposition of mine becomes deprioritised, because this work will affect the beauty of St Brelard too. If the Bridging Island Plan is replaced in the meantime with another island plan with all its glorious flaws and contradictory policies to allow flexibility, with the West of Planning Island framework undelivered, the proposal for West of Planning Island framework will need to be presented afresh, I suspect, as a new proposal under new planning policies and new funding proposed. And I have seen this happen with 2 proposals for development or improvement for St Brelard's Bay in the last 10 years. And funding agreed for the development of those plans only then pulled away and the proposals abandoned. So I have been there, thought that there was a plan to be brought forward, seen things developed, even a character appraisal in the case of the St Brelard's development plan that cost close to 100,000 or so to actually develop, and it's not been proceeded with. So again, I have been there, got the T-shirt, and I'm fed up with wearing it, and I'm no longer buying it. The infrastructure of the island's prime pre-beach resort continues to deteriorate with no plan for it and no supporting tax policies even delivered. And I have serious concerns whether Kennefe is actually going to receive much better. In this respect, I refer back to Deputy Shern's excellent speech on Amendment 17 in respect of Lasquay. We are all victims of an unproductive system that makes us like Incy-Wincy Spider climbing up the spout, only to have our efforts washed away by change of government, lack of resources or other budgetary demands. And that's how developers feel engaging with our planning system. We should be empowering communities, not destroying them. Think about the village, Cuthar in southern Spain, which famously painted itself blue to attract visitors, a move so successful the visitors voted to keep the colour permanently. Contrast that with Jersey, where residents of an area may well be consulted, and once the stars collide to a proposal produced, funding and a ministerial priority made, but again, only after character studies being commissioned from experts, more or less telling everybody what we know already, with recommendations that may well be ignored. The closure of banks in Kennefe and the closure of restaurants nearby are the result of an economy that has been damaged by a lack of investor confidence. That uncertainty has been caused by a planning system, and we cannot deliver plans without investment. So let's start changing these plans to be productive and enable islanders to be more productive. As Assistant Minister for the Economy, I have worked with officers to address some planning loopholes that have led to the West losing some key visitor economy sites to housing. But the Bridging Island Plan, our current planning policy, and maybe our tax regime needs to be changed to support economic growth more. I remain willing to assist my fellow parish representatives in seeking to shape the West of Island planning framework with the benefit of the scars of experience. In that respect, the speech given by the Constable St Brelard St Helier resonates again. I would join my fellow members of the Council of Ministers in supporting this amendment, but I do so reluctantly for the reasons I have stated. In the meantime, I hope States members will support my advocacy for the promotion of codes known as neighbourhood plans. As States members, we should work together with government officers to produce a better system for everyone, in which communities can be better involved and our constituents, the economy and the public all better served. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Does any other member wish to speak on the amendment? I call upon Deputy Miles to reply. Deputy Miles.
Thank you, sir. And I think, first of all, I need to thank Deputy Luce in particular for accepting the amendment, but also Connétable of St John for finding the funding for what I think clearly as a result of the debate is seen to be a very important part of the preparation work for the next island plan. I'd also like to thank Conatable Crowcroft, not only for his kind words, but for his advice about the challenges and opportunities that are presented by this funding. I'd also acknowledge Conatable Vibert's clarification about the bollards out west. I wasn't aware that there was any agreement there. I was particularly struck by Deputy Morell's view about the town that never was. I thought that was quite a good description of where we are. Again, I just want to reiterate that this money is for a West of Island planning framework and not specifically to be spent to renovate the Kennervay Parade and Precinct. Yes, that is the heart of the parish and it is a very important consideration, but actually this funding is for the West of Island framework. I'm not going to say too much more, sir. I'm absolutely delighted that the Council of Ministers have found the funding to support this amendment. It will deliver value. So thank fellow deputies of St Brelard and also representatives of the Western parishes for all their support. So finally, my commitment is to engage with the department to ensure that the planning framework delivers the best value and enhances the west of the island for all islanders to enjoy. Thank you very much, and I call for the appel.
The appel has been called for. Thank you, Deputy. Members are invited to return to their seats. I ask the greffier to open the voting. If all members present in the chamber and remotely have been able to cast their votes, then I ask the greffier to close the voting. Now I can announce that the amendment has been adopted unanimously, 40 votes for. We now return to the government plan as amended. Does any member wish to speak on the government plan as amended before we go to a final vote on the plan? Deputy Mezek.
Well, thank you, sir. It has been 5 years since I last voted for a government plan, and I'm absolutely delighted to be in a position to be supporting one this time. Sir, this budget, it's fair to say, looks fairly different to what a budget would look like if one were being proposed by a Reform Jersey-led government. There are lots of things that are high up on our list of priorities and things that we believe are vital for a government in Jersey to achieve if we're to secure a long-term sustainable future for the island, because our party accepts the basic premise that Jersey's tax and spend model is broken. And I think that the wrangling there's been over some amendments in this debate is an obvious sign of that we have the pressures of an ageing population and the higher quality public services that our population, I think, rightly expects to have the decent standard of living that in a wealthy society like Jersey they ought to expect, are not being fulfilled and haven't been adequately fulfilled by successive governments for years now, which is why so many times in the last few years we have had debates on things like health charges, waste charges, all things that we regard as symptoms of the fact that Jersey needs to raise more money to provide those services, but governments have not grasped the nettle on that properly. But sir, we've taken a position on that we would not support tax rises based on that rather opaque options that previous governments had looked at, until, and only until, we have fixed our regressive social security contributions system, scrapped the upper earnings cap, which, by the way, if we'd done, we wouldn't have needed such a divisive debate on the use of the state's grants for funding living wage support packages. And we need to equalise our income tax system to make it more progressive across the board, and doing so would raise enough money for us to not need to think about regressive health charges and the like, which previous governments have gone for before. But, sir, to the credit of the current Chief Minister and the current government, this budget, I don't think, seeks to make that situation worse, and isn't doing what I think previous governments have done, which is to hoodwink the public into increasing taxes on them without actually saying that that's what they were doing. This government at the start of its term of office said that it was going to keep charges low and not add extra costs onto islanders to protect them during the cost of living crisis. And this budget does exactly that. It doesn't seek to raise regressive taxes on the population of Jersey. It increases tax allowances, it's frozen duties, and in my view, those were the right measures for this time. It also seeks to focus on some of the priorities that were agreed in the CSP at the start of this government's term. In particular, things that I'm extremely delighted to be supporting are the 1.5 million to begin extending nursery places to 2 to 3-year-olds, something that's going to be absolutely transformational to the children and the families who benefit from that. The 1.2 million to get the school meals programme into more primary schools, a big priority for Reform Jersey that has been over the years, and something I'm delighted to see happening. So £2 million extra for First Step, with the door open to more funding in the future, and of course that £10 million next year for the living wage support package to help this journey to abolishing poverty pay in Jersey, something that we've been campaigning for years and now is finally a reality because of the work that this government is doing, that this budget will be doing. And it's a far cry from what I remember witnessing in previous years, and I know some members don't like me bringing up this history, but I make no apologies for it. But we have seen real austerity in previous government budgets. I remember that worst day I experienced in this assembly, where a budget was approved that cut £10 million of support for the most vulnerable people in Jersey. This budget is putting £10 million in supporting abolishing poverty pay. What a change that has been, and a change I'm delighted to support and delighted to be a part of. And of course, times are tough, and there hasn't been the expansion of projects in this budget that I might have liked to have seen. And there's the moratoria on the hiring of new civil servants on high salaries, which of course doesn't apply to frontline staff, so that's a material difference that there's been from previous austerity budgets, and something that I think is justifiable at this moment in time. So, sir, whilst this budget may not be as radical as a budget would be if it were being proposed by a Reform Jersey-led government, it's a budget that makes really good progress on some key items that I think at the end of this term we'll be able to say to our constituents, you know, forgetting all of the usual political hot air and bluster, there are items in here that will have improved people's lives that we can point to, be proud of, and say to the public of Jersey that when you do politics properly, you can make a difference and you can improve their lives. And that's why, for the first time in 5 years, I'm delighted to be able to support a government budget.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Doublé.
Thank you, sir. I want to talk about, my speech is going to be in 2 parts. First of all, I'm going to briefly touch on the comments paper produced by my panel. And before I go into the detail of that comments paper, I want to extend my thanks to my panel and to the panel's officers, and we're very lucky to have excellent scrutiny officers working for the panel, and they've worked very hard on this and produced a comprehensive comments paper. One of the overarching concerns of the panel is the sustainability of funding mechanisms for healthcare services. And when the SLC questioned the Chief Minister on the budget, we did discuss the rate of growth in healthcare spending, the fact that it's not sustainable, and the Health Minister himself has spoken to the panel in public hearings about the healthcare inflation, which we heard from the Minister is rising a lot higher than regular inflation. So this is a key concern of the panel, and one of our key recommendations is that the Minister for Health should produce a plan to reform Jersey's healthcare funding model, and that he should do that before the end of this government's term of office. And so I see that as one of the most important things that needs to be done, because the health of our islanders, without good health, then nothing else can be enjoyed. And it's absolutely critical that this is focused on. Secondly, sir, the rationale behind the utilisation of the reserve funds to purchase the government headquarters building, the panel found that this did not align with the fund's intended use, and also that the reduction of the state's grant payment into the Social Security Fund, which would support the transition to a living wage scheme. I think we are not disagreeing with the support mechanisms for the living wage scheme, but it is separately, and in terms of the responsibility of the panel, we do have a responsibility to look at how that fund is being utilised. And we found that we did not agree with the way that was being utilised. And of course, this has been covered in the debate, and the States has made its decision on that, but I just raised that so that members can note that it was a panel finding. And we did note that that was a recurring theme within the budget. For good or bad, I'm not sure in each case, because there is a level of creativity there, but also perhaps finding creative ways sometimes creates some unforeseen issues, and also sets trends which future governments may be creative in ways that we don't agree with. So that's something to watch out for. Also, the panel noted that a lack of resource and staffing was a cause for delay in the progression of many work streams, and that this needs to be looked at, and sufficient resourcing and future planning should be factored in prior to work streams and priorities being initiated, with the aim of delivering improvements to services for islanders. In terms of IVF funding, the panel were pleased that the allocation of £620,000 for this work stream, that's a positive step forward. But we have found, following submissions from several island organisations, that more work is needed to ensure accessibility and inclusivity for islanders. So we are urging the Minister to review the funding associated with this work stream, to reassess the criteria, and also, and critically, and this has been a theme in our scrutiny of health, the decision to not follow NICE guidelines. We are concerned about that. So I'm not going to go into too much detail on the comments, because I hope that members have considered them. What I will now do is discuss, actually, first of all, before I move on to general, my general views as a States member, I do want to thank the Health Minister for accepting the panel's amendment around the termination of pregnancy law. Now, there has been some backwards and forwards on this, and I was really pleased at the final stages of lodging this amendment to have some constructive discussions with the Health Minister and his officers, and I was aided by my scrutiny officers on that. And we did have several iterations of this amendment that we discussed with the Minister, and we were able to get to an agreement. And I think also what was pivotal in that is the amount of islanders who contributed to the consultation on this area, which of course was initiated by the previous health minister. But that public interest is key, not just for scrutiny, but for any parts of our democracy. Islanders showing an interest in topics that are important to them really does make a difference. And the fact that the panel had so much data that members of the public had contributed their views, the panel was able to be very certain about the fact that this was an area of public interest, and there was a clear direction that the public wanted to go with it. So yes, thank you to the Minister for accepting that amendment, and the panel will be asking for regular updates on the progress of that work to reform the termination of pregnancy legislation. Sir, I will move to some general points about the budget. And I want to pick up on something that Deputy Mezek said about early years funding. And I am very pleased that early years continues to be prioritised. I do still have some questions, however. And I wonder if either the Minister for Children or the Minister for Education, or even perhaps the chair of the relevant scrutiny panel, is able to assist me on this, because I have asked a question in the Assembly, and I wasn't able to fully understand this. But the money that is in this budget for 2 to 3 year olds, and it's a targeted amount of money targeted at 2 to 3 year olds with additional needs. Now, it looks to me so like this is a continuation of the funding that was a growth bid in the previous government plan, as it were. So what my question is this funding on top of that previous growth bid? Is it an additional amount? And are there additional families being helped? Obviously, the children, the 2 year olds who were accessing this last year will be a different cohort of 2 year olds. But is it a greater number of 2 year olds that are able to access this extra funding? But generally, on early years, I am really pleased to see that it's a priority. This is really good, and it's not just being made a priority, but the values that I had put into that work stream around quality, affordability and accessibility are still there as the kind of golden threads throughout those policies. And I see the Minister has also added choice. So there's some kind of growth and development of that thinking around there. And in a previous speech, in a previous sitting, the Minister mentioned how early years had been increasingly focused on by successive ministers. And I want to actually thank a previous Senator, Deputy Valwar, because it was her who established the Early Years Policy Development Board and published a report with recommendations. And it was Senator Valwar who started the Assembly down this road, urged by, of course, by myself and other members who were interested in early years. And I hope that the Assembly will continue to focus on this area. I do think that we need to put a lot more investment into this area. And that's something that I believed in the previous government. And as Assistant Minister, I was aiming to achieve that. And obviously it needs agreement of government. But I do urge this government in next year's budget to put a lot more investment into this area, because we need to be offering some universal hours to the 2 to 3 year olds. And I believe that is on the Minister's plan. And it must be done in conjunction with both the states and the private settings. And I know it's very difficult to take everybody's views and make sure that everybody is listened to. But I just encourage the Minister and urge the Minister to continue doing that, and to continue with those those key themes and values of quality, affordability and accessibility, with quality, I think, being the most important and the needs of the children being at the heart of any investment there. So I want to touch on the SLC hearing with the Chief Minister. I thought it was a good hearing. It was a really good opportunity for all the scrutiny chairs to question the Chief Minister on the general themes. And we questioned the Chief Minister on his vision for the island. And one of the questions that I asked, and one of the themes which I had suggested, was around people. And what impact does this budget have for certain demographic groups, for certain types of people living in our island? And I've raised questions about this, and I think had some positive responses, and the Chief Minister has committed to considering the needs of these groups in the cost of living ministerial group. For example, single parents, elderly people, and those living with a disability, and there will be other groups that are affected in different ways by this budget. And the Chief Minister, and indeed the External Relations Minister, was also at that hearing. They were able to name some of their policies after some thinking time. They were able to name some policies that help these groups. But the feeling that I got was that it was a bit of an afterthought, that these policies hadn't been targeted specifically at these groups. And when government is developing a vision, what I would like to see is that these vulnerable groups are considered seriously from the start, and that policies are developed accordingly. Because there are groups of people on our island that have intersectional, they have characteristics that mean that our policies impact them in different ways, either in positive ways or negative ways. And I think an understanding of that is really important. And this is one of the reasons why actually I was really disappointed that Deputy Miles' amendment wasn't, first of all, that it wasn't accepted in full. And secondly, that it was approved only as amended, because having that data on what life is like for different types of islanders is so critical. And one message I will send to government is please, please, please find the money to carry out the Jersey Lifestyle and Opinion Survey every year. That is really important. I have used the data from that survey in so many pieces of work that I have done, and it's absolutely critical in helping us understand what islanders are thinking and what islanders are going through and what their lives are like. So generally, this budget, the social policies within this budget do mostly align with my values. And again, some of the other amendments that I've lodged beyond the panel amendment, they were accepted. I think another 2 amendments, and even one amendment that I was preparing to draft after this was brought to my attention by a member of the media, and indeed I spoke out about it in the media. The Chief Minister saw that TV report and resolved to find the funding, and it was for the Move More toddler sessions. And the conversation I had with the Chief Minister, I was really heartened by it, because he did take that immediate action and resolve to continue the funding. And that showed to me that he was listening to islanders, and that he is able to take those decisions to prioritise the things that islanders want the budget to go towards, because that's the money that we're allocating, we should be allocating it to things that are important to islanders. I do have a caveat. So the Move More toddler sessions, I'm grateful that the Chief Minister is finding the funding for that this year, but there does need to be a sustainable plan for those sessions going forwards. It really concerns me that Jersey Sport feel that it's not in their remit to provide these sessions, and I'm not actually certain which minister is responsible for this now because sport tends to
Deputy,
move around,
the
doesn't
bell
it?
has gone. You've had your 15 minutes.
Oh, okay. Thank you, sir. I couldn't see the timer. Thank you.
Thank you very much. There's any other member to speak on the... Yes, Deputy Feltham.
Thank you, sir. I'm pleased to follow the chair of my scrutiny panel. I look forward to working closely with the panel over the coming year. The passing of this budget will mark a significant moment for hard-working people on lower incomes in this island. This budget will enable me as Social Security Minister to take the steps to raise the minimum wage and work towards the Assembly's aim of a living wage for all islanders. And despite the tight financial situation, I've been able to make sure that income support uprates are secure and will be made in January at above the cost of living rate. The budget will enable me to continue the work that I am doing in relation to income support, modernising income support, promoting it to people who may apply, and also continuing to develop our policies and make them more fit for purpose. I'm also intending to look at eligibility for some of our means-tested pensioner benefits as well. I will continue other schemes that the department have been prioritising, such as the Work Well scheme, which enables people to return to work while they are recovering from illness. And also, of course, the disability and inclusion work, which is so important to me and a real priority. I was pleased to be able to accept Deputy Dublay's amendment to the government plan, which provides further support to Connect Me. And of course, the social prescribing programme will continue to develop in 2025, along with community connectors. I was also pleased to be able to work closely with the Health Minister and Deputy Gardner to provide a solution for Cheshire Homes as well. Collaborative working is incredibly important to me as a minister, and this budget has been done in collaboration across the ministerial team. I look forward to working in 2025 to achieve the outcomes across our ministerial portfolios. I also look forward to moving into the new government building. I think that the decision made yesterday is a win-win for islanders. The government building will be more accessible, more inclusive, and I make my commitment as Social Security Minister to continue to work to make sure that islanders feel comfortable and confident to come to my department and request the help that they need. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Does any other member speak on the budget government plan as amended? Deputy Moore.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Sorry, I was just making an additional note that Deputy Feltham inspired me. But talking of inspiration, there have been many literary quotes, and particularly in relation to Lord of the Rings, during the course of this debate. I've enjoyed the humour and the levity that they've brought. It also helped me to recall that my father, bless him, spent many hours reading The Hobbit to my sister and myself. Unfortunately, though, I didn't really enjoy The Hobbit. And I guess that's why I became a journalist, as I prefer to deal in fact and evidence rather than in fantasy, sir. And Alice in Wonderland has also been quoted much during the course of this week. And I have to say, I do feel a little bit like Alice, who has stepped through that keyhole and found a world where all is not quite what it seems. For all the bluster and frankly some unkind words, sir, we just have to look at the FPP, who reported quite simply on the budget and gave us the evidence. To quote the FPP, this government plan shows a 3% increase in expenditure of £103 million over 25 to 27 compared to the government plan of 2024. This is net of a proposed saving programme worth £47 million per annum. End quote. We learnt last night in the coverage of the Health Board's meeting that the health budget is going to end up with a greater overspend than predicted, an extra £3 million. So the outturn will actually be even greater than the FPP had thought. It seems the Health Minister has not been able to deliver the changes of the financial recovery programme that the financial recovery programme had identified. So if the Health Minister, who we all remember claimed in January he had all the answers, but has distinctly struggled to answer any when they've been put to him in this chamber, if he can't meet the challenge of the job, then I think it would be helpful if they could describe why. Given that there has been public investment in expert support for health in the form of the turnaround team, what help for the rest of the ministers? Can we have the confidence that this government will do what it says? Actions, sir, speak louder than words. Yet what action have we seen to date? Not a lot. Minimal communication and a bit of repackaging. To quote another literary great, Oscar Wilde, I guess I can take some comfort that imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. Deputy Mezek earlier referred to the early years work, the school meals and other projects that were brought forward initially by the previous government. I called it simplify and stop because, yes, annual growth has to be curbed. We agree. But there's a new name now, reprioritisation, replacing Simplify and Stop and also the Value for Money programme. But despite this, starting under the previous government, there is still no clear plan. It is a matter of public record that I asked ministers and officials to stop and simplify in both 2022 and 2023. This work began, but like many other projects that were on the table, just like the Liscay Youth Club, they have been left in limbo all year. It's quite frankly inexcusable. There is still no clarity on the plan for delivering this saving programme, simply salami slicing cuts without a plan. That is perhaps why, rather than reducing expenditure, this budget actually proposes a 3% increase on the former government's projections. Yesterday's debate on the Transform project helped to identify what has happened, a major project that has increased by 50%. So it is now costing the public an extra £10 million more than projected last year, but there's no detailed explanation as to why. It seems that it's simply the cost of the delay that this government itself has caused. How can these examples give confidence that the government has got spending under control at all? As Deputy Ozef said earlier, they are both perhaps penny and pound foolish. There's a commitment to remove management layers and to curb growth in the public sector. Again, something we can agree on. But where is the plan? All we have seen so far is that those who want to take voluntary redundancy have left and they tidy up behind them as they walk away. That is no way to transform the public service. Just when they were recovering from the previous Alliance-led government and the damage they did, along with their chief executive, the male one, the Alliance gang return in sheep's clothing and hang the guillotine above the door again. Transformation needs a plan, sir, and it needs leadership. Instead, I'm afraid Deputy Farnham descends to playing a blame game. He claims he's tidying up a mess, but of course what he forgets, or perhaps avoids, is that until June 2022, he was the Deputy Chief Minister of the former Alliance-led government. Yes, the one that the Reform Party also voted against in previous budgets. It was my government who were tidying up the mess that he and his gang had created. So it's probably best not to carry on with the blame game, sir, because it is unedifying. But the government building that Deputy Feltham just referred to is also perhaps a good example. That was inspired by a former Chief Minister, the one before me. And I think yesterday's decision was a very sad moment, not only to solidify that unfortunate decision to go ahead with that building in the first place when there was a cheaper alternative available to public money, but also in this time when there is a different approach to commercial space. I think we have missed out on doing a better deal that could have been struck and therefore had lesser impact on the public purse and delivered a better investment for the Social Security Reserve Fund. But there we are. Change is needed, sir, but effective change needs clear rationale and strategy for it to be delivered. Living under threat does nothing but damage morale and productivity. To provide an example, the first that public servants knew about the decision for the interim chief executive to stay for a further 2 years, I'm told, was when they saw it in the news. It is hard not to despair, and forgive me for not being more light-hearted. This year has been difficult. It has been depressing. But this debate confirms to me that this government is simply a project of folly. The Assembly was told in January that there would be great leadership. To quote a constituent who visited their deputies in St Mary, St One and St Peter at a recent surgery, in their view, the leadership is invisible. So what has this all been about? What did we have the delay and the reversal of direction that the public voted for? The fulfilment of a cosy deal behind the Old Boys Club is to revert to the status quo. Let me just remind you that all was clearly not what the public voted for in 2022. Times are hard. Is there a fiscal stimulus plan to boost the construction industry? No. Instead, we're being asked to vote for public money to be loaned to privately invested medicinal cannabis businesses, whilst critical public services have had to slice 20% off their budgets. Unable to explain what their strategy is, unable to find the time to read the documents or to be on top of their brief. Unable to fully explain why the budget for an IT project has increased by 50%, I hear that what the strategy actually is to do nothing, say nothing, and get re-elected so we can have another 4 years of this. Deputy Tadia asked on Wednesday what will be the legacy of this government plan. Well, from what we have heard and not heard this week, the legacy, in my view, sounds a bit like this. A government plan of increased spending, delay, lack of action, lack of vision, lack of strategy. A government increasing spending, not decreasing spending. The sense is that there is a poverty of ambition for our island and its people. I guess that's what defines the difference between conviction politicians and those who merely seek a title. This is, I acknowledge, simply a protest speech, sir. Believing as I do in evidence-based decision-making, I have tried to stick to evidence and facts. I'm fully aware that speaking out will incur the wrath of government members, but I can hardly be less unpopular. This is why I have kept my own counsel for most of the year. However uncomfortable it is important for the public record, however, to set out clearly what the continuing loyalty of members to this government is propping up. In closing, I simply remind members that there were key themes we consistently heard from the public during the election. The public wanted to see change. They wanted to see compassion, transparency and accountability and an end to the Old Boys Club. Does this government deliver on those hopes? In my view, sir, it's sadly lacking and I cannot support it.
Thank you, Deputy. Does any other member speak on the government plan? Yes, Deputy Miles.
Thank you, sir. And I raised just to say a few words on behalf of the Corporate Services Scrutiny Panel. As members will have seen, the Corporate Services Scrutiny Panel published their budget review last week. It is the first review that has been produced since the new government formed following the vote of no confidence in 2024. Each scrutiny panel individually reviewed their own elements of the budget, and the Corporate Services Scrutiny Panel conducted the overarching review. So our report provides some detailed commentary on many of the specific proposals, some of which have been debated over the last few days. And I commend it to members as a very good read. We have made recommendations and quite a few findings. So the budget debate is an important milestone for the States Assembly to determine the tax and spending priorities for the following year, which we note have changed considerably compared to previous years. I think of particular note, the budget was lodged earlier than usual to allow detailed scrutiny. In practice, we don't feel that this has worked particularly well, as insufficient information was provided to fully understand the thinking behind and the impact of many of the proposals. That meant work on this review was challenging due to the delay in receiving responses to the panel's requests for information, and we hope that these delays will not be repeated in future years. Missing updates on 2024 progress, ministerial priorities and 2025 business plans hindered transparency. In terms of our public engagement, we were quite pleased that Democracy Week coincided with the pre-budget period. So in September, the panel held several pop-up consultation events across the island, and we're grateful to everybody who stopped and spoke to us and spent time expressing their views and concerns about this budget. And members of the other scrutiny panels were also able to attend island schools during Democracy Week to engage with children and young people. It's a matter of regret to the panel that the Youth Parliament is currently paused and that we were not able to use this very important forum as a means to seek the views of young people on the state's spending plans. For the first time, though, an online video and youth version were prepared, and that change is very welcome. We would suggest that there's still work to do to communicate the budget to a wider audience, and we've made a number of recommendations in that regard. But our panel are grateful to all the stakeholders we approached and who provided specific and detailed responses to us, as well as members of the public who gave their feedback. The budget is heavily based on the priorities in the common strategic policy of this government. And whilst that's understandable, there's a lack of clarity around the prioritisation of other projects, and the panel makes several findings and recommendations around risk analysis and assessment, governance and monitoring, and perhaps most importantly, the impact of reducing budgets on the efficiency of public services. The rationale for the postponement of cancellation of projects should be transparent. We had a long debate yesterday about the future of Liscay Youth Club. Where budgets increase, the reason should be clearly stated, so there is assurance that money is well spent. And again, sir, we debated the Transform project, and I'm not entirely clear that we understood the rationale for the increase in funding. The stated aim to curb growth in the public sector is not underpinned by evidence or compelling data. Indeed, all the panels reported a lack of data and insufficient detail in financial information presented. Headline figures have been provided, but the lack of availability of departmental plans proved problematic. It is a particular concern that funding for the Cabinet Office has been significantly reduced without a clear rationale. As we've debated yesterday, this will impact upon the work of Statistics Jersey, who have stated that it will lead to a reduction in output of key statistics. And this is particularly problematic for the Health and Social Security panel. And we're equally concerned that this reduction may have unintended consequences more broadly across our community. Close monitoring of the assessment of the impact on service delivery and staff retention as a result of this restructure is absolutely critical. This is the first time that the Corporate Services Scrutiny Panel has focused on gender-responsive budgeting, and it's an area that we shall be encouraging the government to develop for future budgets. This approach will ensure that all sections of our community are considered at an early stage in planning and therefore adequately supported. And we also make a recommendation that future budgets incorporate a more transparent and comprehensive detail on any reprioritisation of funding or proposals, ensuring that all stakeholders understand how and why funding shifts occur. As in previous years, the Fiscal Policy Panel report has been very helpful to us, and this report cautions against including speculative savings in the budget due to the risk it will pose to departmental budgets in future years if those savings are not able to be made. This has not been heeded, and £4 million of speculative savings have been included in this budget. So the panel put forward two amendments to the budget. The first amendment is to acknowledge the work continuing in relation to the establishment of a Jersey Public Services Ombudsman. That was accepted, and we are very grateful for that, and we look forward to the conclusion of the review that is going to be provided and led by Deputy Scott. The second amendment, as we debated yesterday, was to reinstate the growth funding for Statistics Jersey. The full amount was sadly rejected, but I distinctly remember a commitment from the Chief Minister to see what he could do to fully restore that funding. So I think that's probably all I have to say. I know other members wish to speak, but finally I'd like to thank all the members of my scrutiny panel, and indeed all the members of the other scrutiny panel who have contributed to our review, for their patience, for their dedication, for their diligence and their skill in producing this report. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy.
So can I just ask a quick question, not of the Speaker? I just wonder whether we're likely to break for lunch and come back, or whether members will want to continue. If I'm absolutely honest, so my daughter's invited me out for lunch, and it's quite nice. But I just want to know whether to say no. It's probably me paying, but there you go. I just think it's...
Well, I could ask by indication how many members wish to speak in relation to this matter. An indication of lights. Deputy Renouf, Deputy Ward, Deputy Illigus reply in due course, and Deputy Jones, Southern. So quite a few members. So I think we'll be breaking in the usual way at lunchtime. I think that's...
So is it not the case that we also have some subsidiary business?
There's more to follow, yes. There's more to follow, yes. This isn't it, as it were. So yes, we'll be sitting this afternoon, I think. Yes, who wants to speak next? Deputy Ward?
Thank you, sir. First of all, I just want to... Sorry, just dropped my cable there. First of all, I just want to thank all the hard work done by officers that went into the production of this budget. This is a substantial piece of work that takes huge amounts of hours to produce, so I'd like to acknowledge that effort. Do I agree with its content? Well, that's a moot point. I think the sheer number of amendments brought and subsequently defeated highlights that I believe the government has missed many great opportunities to put out a positive message to business. The amendment brought by Deputy Ozif on a stamp duty holiday to help get the housing market going again was particularly galling. Deputy Tom Binney reminded us of the importance of supporting our economy, yet when the vote was taken, he mysteriously missed the vote. What have those involved in the property business got to look forward to? More red tape, the housing minister as he pushes on with his residential tenancy law. There seems to be no appetite in government to actually help our economy. On a positive note, I would like to thank the Infrastructure Minister for continuing to invest in the Afterpower pool, and I think this will help reinvigorate the historic part of town. I am, though, deeply disappointed that the monies budgeted for the Liscay Youth Centre have been lost. I've spoken about investing in our business community, but we need to invest in our young people now. Jam today. I understand the need for a St Helier Youth Centre, but this is jam tomorrow. And with a price tag of between 10 and 15 million pounds, that's a lot of jam. We need solutions today. Our young people are impatient, which is why I want to work with the Constable of St Helier on the Gas Place site and deliver a meanwhile use in the centre of St Helier, providing facilities for our young people long before the Ann Street Brewery site, which currently doesn't even have a change of use permission, is completed. I'm really pleased to see the development of a visionary new park on the parade, in which the parish has invested a significant sum of £750,000. This will provide an exciting new space for the young people of St Helier. The debate that depressed me the most was the reduction in the budget of monies available to both Jersey Business and Digital Jersey. The feedback to me was swift. Don't they realise how demotivating this is? Why do we keep putting out such negative messaging to those who are looking to invest in our economy? The economy isn't a nice to have. Its success is vital if we are to pay the bills of government. Whilst I am an advocate of a living wage, I am truly concerned about the speed at which wages are increasing. I know personally that we've already seen in excess of a 40% increase in base wage rates over the past 3 years in our business alone. We've seen hospitality businesses close down, not only because wage rates have increased so dramatically, but also because of the impact on increased mortgage rates. Some 18 increases in the past 3 years has shrunk the disposable income of so many. Many simply can't afford to go out in the way they once did. Even yesterday, a small business in the Central Market, which only opened their doors months ago, have decided not to renew their lease. Now we have a further increase on the cards, and despite the £20 million support scheme promised, I'm still to be convinced as to how many small businesses will actually benefit from such a scheme. To date, we've all had to suck it up. These extraordinary increases in our costs and the consequences are there for all to see. Turning briefly to how the support scheme is being funded, I found it quite extraordinary that hard-won and well-protected savings are being used to support businesses which inevitably is speculative, are being used to carry out this transition. The latest CNAG report has told us that £5 million is still trying to be retrieved from the overspends in the COVID scheme, so trying to get that money back. I was, though, particularly disturbed by the comments of those who made a complete volte-face on their defence of the HIF. Deputy Southern gets to my mind the prize for the most incredible U-turn, and I quote, "It's a rare occurrence for me to stand and completely support the words of Deputy Balash. Deputy Balash, when he gets it right, boy does he get it right. 12 months ago. Only now he votes against the Deputy's amendment because of a change in the political wind. I'm just waiting for the Deputy to tell me that black is the new white, as he now advocates the raiding of the piggy bank." Of course, previous defenders of the HIF include Deputies Tom and Rose Binet, both of whom a year ago were such advocates of Deputy Balash's strongly held view. Such opinions now appear to have turned to so much sand. I absolutely believe that using the HIF is not the way to fund speculative business support. We can't let the delivery of manifesto pledges override hard-won efforts to ensure that there is a significant safety net for the most vulnerable in our society. No wonder there was such a vigorous defence a year ago. Last night, the loss of the debate over reduced funding of the stats unit was...
Sorry, carry on.
Yeah, okay, so last night, the loss of the debate over reduced funding of the stats unit was particularly galling. Data gives us an evidence base on which to develop policy. As much as Deputy Mezek's inbox appears to be a particularly good source of data for him, I think I'd prefer the professional input of the stats unit. As was pointed out last night, we will need to understand the impact of moving to a living wage economy, both positive and negative, plus the impact of the support scheme. Once again, I find myself referencing economic impact. Are we really on top of the numbers? I'm struggling to find any message that says we're investing in our economy. We're backing business. Cutting business facing service budgets, not being bold and helping the housing market to get moving with a temporary suspension of stamp duty, begs the question, how do we think all the nice-to-haves that the Reform Party so eagerly promote are paid for? If the only response is put up taxes, I'm afraid I'm out. I genuinely want to support this huge body of work, but I feel I can't. It's the economy, stupid.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Brenneth. Oh, I thought you wanted in due course. All right.
The Deputy, could I just ask for a point of clarification, I think it would be, because the Deputy in his speech, Deputy War...
Well, if you're prepared to accept one...
No, sir.
No, he's not.
it might be a point of order then. I'm not, because the Deputy made some incorrect statements during his speech.
Well, we'll get the chance to be spoken, haven't you? But I'm afraid to say that that's not a point of order. Those members who I put their lights on generally wishing to speak are Deputies Reneth, Jearn, Southern and Tadier. I put your names down in that order. Deputy Reneth doesn't want to speak now. Do you want to speak now, Deputy Jearn? Sorry? Well, you don't get to choose, but Deputy Reneth was only giving an indication of his wish to speak in due course. So I don't necessarily have to hold him.
So could I challenge that? I think that's open to all sorts of potential abuse. I'm not sure it's the intention of any member to do that, but you put your light on when you want to speak and you take your position in the queue. Otherwise, there's all sorts of tactical...
So I was responding to a question from the chair to ask how many people who still wish to speak, not that whether I wish to speak now.
Well, I've come across this before.
So, well, I take that, but in that case, there's nothing to answer. It's just a misunderstanding.
Yes. Deputy Jearn. Deputy Jearn.
Thanks, sir. Yes, still typing away to make my speech, but so please forgive me, members. I want to start my speech talking as the chair of the Environment, Housing and Infrastructure panel. And first I would like to thank my panel and officers for all their hard work in developing the comments paper and in the reviewing of the budget that we did since August. And I am sure members have read our comments paper, but I'd quickly like to outline a few of our findings. One of our main concerns, and one which is reflected in a number of our findings, is the short-term nature of the budget. Many work streams have also been slowed or paused as a result of reprioritisation, but mainly to do with the recruitment freeze. In the view of the panel, this lack of long-term strategic thinking means that in some crucial areas of government work there is little security of funding, a lack of contingency planning, and no clear understanding of the legacy which will be left to the governments which will follow from 2026 onwards. And I think this is something that is also important to reflect on, is understanding that legacy which will be left to governments which will follow from 2026, because we are often hearing that this government has only got 2 years to the election, they can do things in 2 years, but we don't hear very much about that long-term thinking, good for the island, projects that go beyond just one government, but actually goes on for many governments because it's not really political. And one of those things that isn't political is our liquid waste strategy. We always have to do something about it. I really don't think it can get apolitical as working out how to sort out our liquid waste. But funding remains unclear for the liquid waste strategy, and this will have an impact and potential failure to deliver work around building our new homes and affordable homes. 21.3 million of the necessary 55 million for the implementation of the strategy has been identified in this budget, but there's been no secure funding for the 33.7 million which will be needed to complete the work, and many of that will then support those affordable homes that have been identified now and potentially needing for affordable homes for the next island plan. So one of our panel's main recommendations in the paper is that as a matter of urgency, the government should prioritise the policy work to introduce a waste charge and or a funding model to ensure that the requirement of the bridging liquid waste strategy is met. And this should be brought towards the Assembly before the end of its term. It's also been striking that Ministers' answers to the limits on available funds was to suggest a constant, ongoing reprofiling of the capital programme. This has meant that it's been very difficult for the panel to determine exactly what capital programme of the States Assembly is being asked to approve, as this always keeps changing. And this has happened between the publication of the budget in August and November debate. In fact, we've all seen today a last-minute change of support for the West of Ireland framework. Funds have now been found, but we haven't heard where those funds have come from. What has been deprioritised for that? Has that been the deprioritisation been the development of introducing a waste charge, for example? We don't know. We don't know. Another example is that in the budget, when it was published in August, St Helier Skate Park was put to 2028, i.e. for another government, therefore, will that happen or not? But now, with discussions, the Minister in his last hearing said there was able to find money, and so St Helier Skate Park will then go ahead. But this panel feels that this decision-making on priority becomes reactive. It's kind of based on urgency or current need or depending on who the ministers are talking to, and not this long-term overall thinking and strategic thinking. And so I still stand here today not entirely sure what are around the capital programmes we are actually supporting, because again, money has been found for West Island framework last minute, but what has been deprioritised. This is also highlighted in the Lascaux debate. As I mentioned in my speech there's no clarity or detail around the abortive costs of this reprioritisation, and something that the panel will continue to request information on in the future going forward. I would like to thank, though, on behalf of the panel, the Minister for Environment and Minister for Infrastructure for accepting both our panel's amendments. One being increasing the percentage of vehicle emissions duty charged for the top two bands of the most polluting non-commercial vehicles. And this money will be used to transfer to the Climate Emergency Fund, something that the panel ensured in their common strategic priorities. Somehow, climate emergency was left off the common strategic priorities back in April, and due to our panel discussions with the Minister, we were able to put climate emergency and work around climate change back onto the priorities. And this amendment with the vehicle emissions duty helps to cement further funding to go towards the Climate Emergency Fund, funding that has been paused because of the pause in the increase in the fuel duty. Fuel duty, so the Climate Emergency Fund had not been getting the amount that it had been calculated to get, so this will be able to top that up. We also proposed the Council of Ministers increase and add Fort Regent redevelopment should be proposed as a separate head of expenditure, and we thank the Minister for Infrastructure for agreeing to this in the budget. And again, our panel will be following the works that will be happening within 2025, because as the Minister said, funding is found. By this time next year, we will be hopefully be seeing a plan that will see works happening in 2026. But carrying on with my own thoughts, and something I echo with Deputy Dublé, that many individual areas of the budget align with my values and my manifesto. However, standing back, I'm concerned that this budget isn't sitting behind a coherent strategy for the future. It does feel like it's sewn together, depending on which minister could muscle in and get funding for their own goals and their own areas of work. We've seen last-minute agreements, which means it's now hard to work out what is being deprioritised. And I know it was late yesterday, and we all wanted to go home, but when I went home, I did reflect on a decision last night that I really still don't really understand. We heard from a professional in the IT world questioning why there was a 50% increase on top of a budget already. So there's budget already there, but a 50% increase on top. That was a project that was only costed in 2023 for another 10 million. And we didn't really get much discussion on that, about that extra 10 million. Yet we had a very long discussion pitting 2 youth centres against each other with pretty much the same amount of money the day before. Or we had a very discussion, a big discussion about taking money from the Social Security Fund to entice businesses to pay the living wage. Again, in the first year, that's 10 million. I don't understand how there was no one really questioned this huge increase, even though there has been a legacy of waste around technology in the government in the past. We're talking about very similar sums in 3 different areas where we had 2 big discussions about and heated debate. But yet, when it came to this increase to a technology discussion and one that a professional questioned, we didn't have more of a discussion about it. And I feel that I think we missed something there. We've also given a carte blanche for a massive heads of expenditure on a multiple site hospital that most of us, or some of us, will know nothing about unless we join the Council of Ministers or we're part of the scrutiny panel. How do I know what is going to be happening with the money spent within that £710 million for the hospital site? I will not be able to get any information. I really do hope that the Minister will be able to at least brief the whole States Assembly on what he knows, what the Council of Ministers know, and what the scrutiny panel know, but a couple of us are not able to know when we know as much as the general public. And I ask if that is really the right way of how it should be in this States Assembly, when some of us are having to agree on a huge one head of expenditure for such a huge amount, yet know very, very little about behind that project, beyond, of course, an acute hospital at Overdale, which, of course, is very important. But what next? It is very, very... We don't really know. It seems very, very vague. And as the wording says, it doesn't say that this is all of it. I think it says, it's the start of. And how big can we go? I think the Treasury Minister, when she explained this project, it's one of the biggest infrastructure projects in Jersey will ever see. And she compared it to something. I'm not sure if I heard it correctly. Was it the HS2 project in the UK? Now, let us just reflect a little bit about what's happened to the HS2 project in the UK. Hugely overrun with costs, massive delays, huge problems with local communities, called many, many times a white elephant project. And why was that? Some of it was because a lot of it was not put to the Parliament to be able to the UK Parliament. Many costs were kept away, so they was unable to have that kind of scrutiny to understand and to see how far it was, how big a project it actually snowballed into. So I really, really hope that our hospital or our hospitals will not become the HS2 project, and it won't become a white elephant project. But I won't necessarily know, because I'm not, again, part of that particular scrutiny panel or the hospital or the Council of Ministers. And I'm really concerned about that. And lastly, I would also say that I'm also concerned about the amount that health is getting. Of course, we need a healthy society, absolutely. But what I'm concerned about, and what we're hearing the last few days in the media as well, is that there is still not a grip on this excessive health spending. How is the health able to have such a black hole? Why is there not being able to get a grip with this? You know, we've seen the health minister is nearly being the minister for nearly a year now. Why are we not able to get a grip on our health financing and understanding what is going on? Why are we again giving even more money and it's still business as usual? We're being told that we're unable to give more to be able to expand around, especially for women's health or for dementia. I've been pushing for money to support the dementia strategy for a long time now. And unfortunately, again, it's always been said, well, we can't because we have to fund business as usual. How, again, are we giving more and more money to business as usual when we need to really see the bigger picture of our health as a society, our health is changing. Dementia is becoming more of a concern, and we need to focus more on prevention to keep us out of the grips of the health community for longer. We need to ensure that we're a healthy society. But what is going to happen next year, I think, is probably what I want to leave us on is, this time next year, will we again being asked to sign off into a black hole of the health financing? I'm sure I could have reflected a bit more, but I'm nearly at the end, which is the longest speech I've ever made in this chamber so far. So thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Southern.
Thank you, sir. And I rise to my feet to thank Deputy Waugh for putting a smile on my face during a budget debate. Savaged, it's just left. Oh dear, missing the best bits. Savaged by a dead sheep springs to mind, I think. And I smile because I believe that this Assembly, including myself, has seen the first steps on the road to a budget led by socialist principles. It's not here yet, but we are on the way. And those socialist principles are based around taking care of the least well-off in our society, those who are middle earners, and not just those who happen to be the wealthiest and the richest. And starting and continuing with those principles is the way forward for Jersey. Many of you refuse to believe that, but I have the faith. And I'm sure I will see in my time that develop. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Catherine Curtis.
Thank you, sir. I'm speaking as chair of the Children Education and Home Affairs Scrutiny Panel. There is really good work being done by the ministers that the CEHA panel scrutinises. The Children's Minister, the Education and Lifelong Minister, and the Home Affairs Minister. However, our job as a scrutiny panel during this budget process is to highlight what's not going so well. So we brought 2 amendments, which I'm pleased to say have been accepted. A review of the apprenticeship scheme and urgent repairs to Highlands College. We really must value our young people more. States members and the public, I think, will be interested to hear the panel's recommendations to the budget, which are, number 1, about the ambulance, fire and rescue headquarters. There have been changes from a proposed shared development. And so we are asking for all the feasibility costs to be published. Secondly, that the Minister for Education and Lifelong Learning and Minister for Children and Families should share details about how the funding is split between them. Thirdly, and this was something brought up in quite a number of submissions to the panel, that there needs to be more clarity around the funding to the third sector. It does seem like a real problem, and so we're asking for detail about how government grant funding will be used to support the third sector. Number 4, the Minister for Education and Lifelong Learning needs to revise engagement with key stakeholders in the early years sector. We've had many submissions from them to say they feel like they're being ignored, so we hope to see an improvement there. And then we have a recommendation around Montalabé School. Montalabé School does not have enough places for the children who need to go there. So we are asking for contingency plans to be published. Next, we have a recommendation about all post-16 courses. We would like to see the Minister for Education and Lifelong Learning review the accessibility of all post-16 courses to include consideration of flexibility of delivery and financial support, because we are hearing of parents who have to get into debt to support their children at university, and we hear of young people who cannot get an apprenticeship placement. And lastly, about the project at Lesquet, which personally I would have liked to support, except that the amendment was to deprioritise the town youth centre. Well, we ask for the Minister for Education and Lifelong Learning and Minister for Children and Families to publish the details about the work, the mitigating measures that will go on at the SCAE and how this will impact the youth service and Samurai School. So just to finish, I still say there is a lot of good work that's proceeding, but the panel hopes for a good response from ministers to our budget comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Tadia.
Thank you, sir. First of all, I'm going to speak with the hat on as Chair of the Economic International Affairs Scrutiny Panel, so I'm not sure for how long on that, but and then I do have some personal remarks to make as a backbencher, effectively, otherwise. So first of all, can I thank the panel and the officers for helping us to do this. We've had various hearings which have included the usual quarterly hearings, which we've been able to ask questions anticipating the budget as proposed, but also specific budget hearings which involved the three ministers, so the Minister for External and Financial Services, the Minister for Economic Development, and the Minister for International Development. So the panel collected and considered evidence from all of these three ministries. I'll read some excerpts from our paper, because I know that not all members will necessarily have it present in their mind. Our panel is concerned about the impact of domestic inflation measured by the Retail Price Index on businesses and customers in Jersey. We also have remaining concerns that the budget shows various different levels of government support across the different sectors. So on the one hand, whilst we're seeing a lot of investment in agriculture and fisheries to the tune of about £6.8 million, we know that actually other areas of the economy which we've tried to highlight through our amendment earlier, the only amendment that we brought as a panel was of course to show that when it comes to potentially the visitor economy, but particularly digital and other business in investment, that there's actually been a reduction there. So simply, I don't want to reopen that debate, sir, but I think when it comes to this budget, we will be continuing to monitor that and see how the additional spend, the additional loans, for example, and support that are going into those sectors are making an impact, but we'd also be keeping a close eye on what this Assembly's decision to reject additional funding for Digital Jersey and Business Jersey, what actually that translates at. And we will make sure that actually, if it seems that there's a negative impact, and that includes, of course, with Jersey Finance, we give a pledge to monitor that to make sure, and it's going to be difficult because not all of these consequences will become apparent in the next year. It could be something that we only see in 5 or 10 years' time. But I think we accept the democratic process and we accept the will of this Assembly. But we will still do our job as a scrutiny panel to, I think, analyse that as best as we can. I think it's really important at this point that I know she's behind me and I feel slightly rude talking to somebody with my back to them, but we are talking through the chair anyway, sir. I want to acknowledge the good work that goes on in the background, often quietly, by the Minister for International Development, who has the key remit of overseeing Jersey Overseas Aid. Because it's a relatively small department doesn't mean that it's not an important one. And we are I do need to put this on record, I think. So we acknowledge that the Minister is is trying to make headway to get towards a more sustainable, a more meaningful allocation that can be made to Jersey Overseas Aid. So from the current level of 0.29 of gross value added to what the OECD average of 0.36 is in terms of gross value added. This is something which is often easy to overlook in the budget because the budget looks about internal matters, about how we fund our local economy. But we can't forget, if we watch the news every night or read the newspapers, that we do live in a globalised world. Jersey has always seen itself as a global player. And the way that relatively affluent places like Jersey, because we mustn't forget that even though a lot of this debate is focused on cost of living, what people can't afford to do, we recognise that Jersey has it good compared to so many places around the world, not least because we're a peaceful community which doesn't immediately have to deal with the ravages of war or famine, which the Minister for International Development knows only too well about. I think we do have to put to the Minister, though, and I'm sure this is something she would welcome as a healthy challenge, if you like, the fact that we note that the current funding levels for the United Nations target, or the current is set at 0.7% of GVA. So whilst we, I think, welcome or at least acknowledge the work that's being done from the Minister to get to the 0.36 from the current 0.26 of GVA that Jersey has, that in itself is going to take quite a number of years to get to that relatively modest state. And it will be, of course, incumbent on future administrations also committing to do that, because we know the overseas aid budget is potentially something which is easily cut, because it's not necessarily, it's a populist thing to do, perhaps to try and cut that. But we do ask the Minister, does she have a vision to get to 0.7% of GVA at some point, or to go beyond the 0.36%, given the great work that the Overseas Aid Commission does? And if I could just say, sir, on a personal level, I did attend at the invitation of the Minister one of the recent presentations at the Arts Centre on the good work of that, and there is so much good work that Jersey does in that regard. So it's not just about looking inwards, it's about Jersey also looking outwards. So at this point, I do want to make some personal comments, and I've struggled with this budget. Members will know that we have a political reality in this Assembly, that nobody has a majority, especially the independents in the Assembly. They have a majority of 1. If they start working with other people, they might have a block vote of 14. As a party, we've got 10 members who are very willing and have always shared core values. So in that sense, it makes it an easy starting point. If you all share collective values and you want to get things done and you agree and you put it in a manifesto, that's your starting point, irrespective of whether you end up collectively in government or collectively outside of government, or as we find ourselves in, half in, half out, sir. Not quite half, of course, it's about 4 to 6 split. That doesn't mean, though, that our values as a party are in any way split. And I reflected halfway through the week, having had some success, but not really much personal success. So I'm very pleased with this budget in the sense that I was able, before the budget, because the key thing is, as a 15-year-old, 16-year-old politician, I was asked the question, why didn't you put your cultural funding in the budget as an amendment? The answer is because I wanted to win. I wanted it to increase. And backbenchers generally, although there have been a couple of exceptions, don't win anything in budgets because they're in a minority. There's a government machine, and it's actually much easier to make a case, especially when there are other factors involved which aren't exclusively related to the budget, to make that case and to win support across the Assembly. So, of course, I'm very happy that this budget does feature the full 1% for arts, culture and heritage. It should have never been tampered with in the first place. And now the onus is, of course, on government to come back and find the money for that. But I'm not here to reopen that debate or to be valedictory, because, of course, we know as a scrutiny panel we were on the losing side, and I've also been on the losing side of some votes here. But it led me to think, what's the greatest thing that is going on in this budget? The living wage, I think, has been talked about, and it is a key promise. It's a key manifesto pledge of myself and my reform colleagues throughout the island, wherever we stood, to say that this is something we will do if we get into a position to be able to push it forward, whether it's from the backbenchers or from government. And of course, I think Deputy Luce summed it up yesterday, that there is a political reality, because talk is cheap in politics. It's very easy when you're outside of government, if you want to just be an opposition member, to criticise. If you want to actually get things done in politics, then you have to make compromises, I think. You have to decide what it is that you're willing to do in order to get policies through, without actually compromising your values, that is. So the starting point, I think, for me, the big one in this is that we talk about what is the long-term impact going to be on the economy. So, you know, coffee shops are potentially closing or restaurants are closing. That's not great, but if you're one of the working poor in Jersey and you don't actually get paid a living wage because you're on a minimum wage, that's probably way above your head anyway, because you're not going to have any disposable income to go out once you've paid your rents. You're not going to be paying a mortgage if you're on below the living wage in Jersey. So it's about actually making sure that more people have more money in their pockets. And what was the, not even political compromise, but what was the negotiation that needed to take place between people like Deputy Luce, who also wants to see a fair society? He also wants to make sure that people who can partake in Jersey's society without, you know, living in poverty. How did we get to that point? Well, the answer is we needed to. There needs to be care taken of the low pay economies and those industries which may well be affected if they were to switch overnight to a living wage. And as political realists, sir, and as a political realist, the Social Security Minister is willing to take that bull by the horns and say, okay, what is it that you want on the other side of the traditional political divide in order to deliver this? And the answer comes back, we need a package. We need a package for the economy, for agriculture, which is going to include productivity, something which Deputy Southern's talked about all of his some 20 years in politics. It's about productivity. It's about making sure that actually there is the money coming into the economy, that people can get paid, and that all goes round the system. So there is a need for that political compromise to be made. And it's one thing to say, I support the living wage, but actually, if you only support the living wage in theory, but never in any real terms to deliver it, your support for the living wage is completely meaningless, because those of the poorest people in Jersey society will continue to remain the poorest. And that's before we, of course, talk about a maximum wage. I don't think we're not going to talk about the maximum wage today, but I've said that before. The maximum wage is, of course, our tax policy. What do you do to try and redistribute in our economy. We do have taxes, and that's what government uses. But we have limited levers within the current administration to actually affect change. And I don't mind if this becomes my last term in office. I know that there will have been a train put in place that it actually sees not just the poorest workers in our society being lifted up, but also those sectors which have struggled so long because of political inaction and because of the impasse between left and right, if we can call it that. The living wage, of course, isn't just the domain of the left, but we will actually see the economy being supported in real terms, and we'll see workers in if you like, that Fordian model, being able to afford to buy products that they can with the wages because they're just about enough to live in what's becoming an increasingly expensive island, sir. If I wanted to, I could quite easily find lots of reasons to vote against this budget. I think that there are elements of it which remain uncertain. I think it's necessarily because government is trying to do things on an old model, but trying to actually look towards a new kind of community and new solutions that will be needed in the future. Of course, they're going to come into difficulties because they haven't fully accepted collectively the political realities, which will mean that you either do less, or if we are to do more, that I think all of our 100,000 plus islanders are requiring, it will require proper leadership, it will require things being paid for properly and sustainable. So sustainable is probably the word we've heard a lot about. To come back to the Economic International Affairs Scrutiny Panel, the Minister for Economic Development is called the Minister for Sustainable Economics, if you like, economic development. And that's the key thing we have to get to grips with. Our current economic model of tax and spend is not sustainable, and there will be a clear choice at the next election in less than 2 years about whether we elect people who are willing to sign up to realism and actually tell us what their plans are for running the island, or whether actually they simply say, let's keep everything the same. We'll promise you not just jam tomorrow, but jam, bread and butter, but we've absolutely no idea about how we're going to pay for that. So you can have jam tomorrow, or you can actually, but if you're going to have it, you're going to pay for it. Not the best ending to a speech, sir. but I think an important one that actually I'm certainly willing to play my part in a collective to make sure that we deliver things, not just take a purist point of view to say it's all or nothing. I prefer to see real change, real money being put in people's pockets and the economy being supported, sir. And that's what I think we've got overall in this somewhat curate's egg of a budget. I'm willing to certainly take the good parts because there are so many good parts in it to build for the future.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Alex Curtis.
Thank you, sir. Now, I could repeat points and members would rightly call me out on standing orders, so I'll try not to in my comments on the budget. Firstly, we could talk about the areas of contention, the hospital being one, and I'll touch on that. The wins we've seen in this, some accountability for Fort Regent. But ultimately, sir, I want to look at this a little differently. And as always, look forward with optimism, although with genuine sadness, it feels like naive optimism. Maybe members can change that. Sir, as 2025 unfolds and the government will get on with delivering their work, hopefully in line with this budget, I will be asking, how will the public follow them in that journey? How will this assembly? We've heard platitudes paid to the scrutiny process in here and how vital it is. Of course, frankly, that feels like it holds little water following our debate on the healthcare facilities heads of expenditure amendment. But scrutiny by this assembly is not enough. Will the public know whether a capital programme is on track proactively through communication by government or only retrospectively by members asking questions in the assembly? Just like this year, how will they have known that Lesquet, with a 3.5 million budget, was actually sidelined for later? How will the public know what investment is being made in IT? How will the experts in industry challenge or champion the design and strategic decisions that are being made as they evolve and play a part to ensure value for money? Will they get to take part in early access programs or contribute to the most important priorities? Will the public know who the recipients are of the productivity support scheme? Will case studies be published by businesses in receipt of public money as to the impact taxpayers' money has had on improving the island's economy and wider society, helping inspire others, yet hold these businesses to account? Will the public follow along with exciting plans on capital programmes such as Fort Regent or those in education through new blog posts or drop-in sessions with government experts, noting that this year has seen a reduction in blogs by the government to 2023? And will we ever find out what Project Breakwater is? Will the public have to continue to submit freedom of information requests to access the same data over and over again? Or will departments take each request as a change and a chance to open another slice of government to the public to build trust and efficiency? Sir, the government have a budget of yet again over £1 billion, and I don't disagree with that quantum. What remains in this budget so far is a failure, in my view, to justify what that expenditure achieves, the vision for its purpose, and as Deputy Miles said on Transform yesterday, the why. We'll be back in 12 months, sir, and I hope the next budget can explain itself better. Ideally, we won't have to wait. It's on the government and ministers to improve how the civil service runs, not just the responsibility for officers. Let's hope they make some progress.
Thank you, Deputy. Does any other member speak on the Deputy Rob Ward?
Thank you, sir. I'll speak now. I've got 10 minutes before lunch. I should get everything sorted by then. A couple of things, sir. I just say to Deputy Miles, which you mentioned, and I can't quite know why I'm saying this to Deputy Miles. There was something she said about, the Deputy said about communication. Point everyone to the child-friendly budget that was produced by the Children's Department, which was a really, really good document, actually. And I think a few adults may have used it as well, to be quite frank. So there were some other things about it if you haven't seen it. And if you haven't, let me know. So if the Deputy can let me know, because obviously it wasn't communicated well enough. But they really have worked hard on that. So this is the first government plan that I've been involved with directly. And since taking over the role of Minister, a number of priorities have been made for me through propositions brought to the Assembly. And significant work has been undertaken to address them. That work's ongoing, and the monies allocated in some areas of this government plan assist me in bringing forward the work from the amendments to those from my amendments to those propositions, and to the key priorities I have for education and lifelong learning. And so, prioritising is the key to leadership. And my approach to this is to be realistic, first of all, to set some clear and achievable goals, prioritise on what truly moves the needle and aligns with defined objectives. And these were agreed and voted on in the CSP. I believe there were 2 cons and 1 abstention from the CSP. Everyone else voted for it. And so it's important, though, to limit priorities and keep the number of priorities manageable. Too many priorities certainly stretch your capacity and reduce effectiveness. And I give some examples of this. So previous government plans routinely had around £150 million in capital projects. This might look good on paper, and some might even describe it as ambitious. But the reality was that half the money couldn't be spent. It was simply not possible to do so much in a year. In my own department, so in 2023, £17.5 million of capital was allocated, but only £5.5 million was spent. £12 million was unspent at the end of the year. And that's just an observation of the reality of what was happening. And so in terms of priorities not being met, I'm going to mention again that the youth facility was prioritised in Central St Helier for Central St Helier children, was prioritised in 2018 in the CSP then, as was a school, as was a new school in Central St Helier, replacing Springfield and St Luke's that are desperately in need of that, with Springfield becoming a park. And neither, not a question of both, but neither, well actually both, if that's good English, sir, materialised. And and we haven't moved forward. The land for the school, and I will say to one of the St Helier deputies who voted to not support that in the park, is still not owned by government, so nothing can happen. And so subsequently, whatever is on there, even the gas place, the old gas site, couldn't be used in the way that was suggested. And when we do get that land, it will be demolished and we'll build the school as quickly as we can. which is really important for that area. And so we have to look at priorities and the way we can do them. And I've been working, trying to push as quickly as we can. So the first thing we do is to get ownership of that land, and then we can actually move into planning permission. We might. But my ambition is before the next election to have a definite and clear timetable for when that school will actually be built, because everything will be in place. It hasn't been since 2018. And I was disappointed. Well, anyway, let's get back to the speech. So we have a real chance of moving the needle on these projects. And my genuine issue with the amendment linked to was the removal of the reference to St Helier. That did pit one area against another, watering down and adding more conflict of priorities. But I will say to the Deputy and to the scrutiny panel, absolutely we'll work as hard as we can to try and get money if it's possible. And there was some mentioned earlier about projects and moving. I think what we need in the capital project is some reality that you have to prioritise, and these are really essential things for the centre of St Helier with the building. So I've made that clear. I'm not going to go over that again. But if other things are in place but can't move, but some can, then I have no problem with saying to the scrutiny panel, yeah, actually, that one wasn't happening, so we're going to move on, and this one can be done. And I'm quite happy to take the criticism in here. I'll give you another reason why I've got happy to take criticism in here in a moment, sir. So I have also prioritised La Passerelle Secondary School, which is desperately needed. Over 60 children who do not have somewhere to go to school because of their specific needs and because of their specific situations. And I thank the officers who have worked to enable this to happen. It will directly impact over 60 children's lives and their families, sir. And I am very hopeful, I'll touch wood, sir, I don't know if it's parliamentary or assembly, that I'm really hoping that can be in place by October next year. That's a real project actually happening, prioritised, with money allocated so it can be done and we can see the impact. And, you know, if that happens, I invite States members to come up and see the school itself. And nurseries are being prioritised with pilot projects. And so I have to say to the panel, I do believe we have engaged over the last 2 years with all of the sectors, and we will continue to do that with the sectors. I have meetings with certain sectors coming up in the next few weeks, both the childminders, Jersey Early Years, First Start Partnership. And officers have been engaging with them constantly. And so I'll give you a little bit of feedback without trying to give you who it was. I received you take a lot of criticism in this job, but sometimes you get nice things. And one of the nice things, I received a card the other day to say about one of the projects that we've set up as a nursery. And it said in this card, there's a quote from a parent, and I actually found this quite moving, I've got to say, that the parent had said they never thought that their child would be playing with another child. And I say to Deputy Dublé and to Deputy Gardner that I have continued that project, and I've said this before, that it's a continuation, but we want to build on it. We're not throwing away the things that have gone before us, and I've recognised the work that's gone before. I absolutely do, but we're getting on with it as well. And that parent to be able to, something we have done in government that says, from all the way back, from all of the round tables that the deputies know about, and all of the work that's gone with that, and all of the individuals involved, for that parent to say, this has had an impact. Well, that's worth for me standing here and taking all the stick, particularly over the last few days, so that's okay. It's sort of, I feel a lot better about it when I get something like that and it washes off. And we will continue to work across the sector to pilot. And that's the way in which we can work with every single sector to see what works. And I asked them to come on board and see what we're doing. It's not a threat. It's about developing as we go along. And Deputy Dooley asked me a question, and I have to apologise, Deputy Dooley. I wrote down, and I can't read my own handwriting, there is new money for the continuation of the nursery pilots, is my answer. And yes, I do want to go through a NEF 15 hours is the plan at the moment for 2 to 3 year olds, because it will help families. But that is dependent upon nursery places being available, as we know. And I think we can work towards that rapidly, and I'm hoping it will grow as we get those things in place. And so one of the other things about prioritising is to be able to evaluate and adapt, and that's exactly the approach that we're taking with nursery provisions and the pilots that will be in place. And so I will say, if the pilots don't work, we'll do it differently. And I'm quite happy to take criticism and say, you did something that didn't work. So yes, but we're aware it didn't work, and so we've changed it. That's exactly what you have to do. And so I'm happy to delegate tasks. There are lots of professionals, and the previous ministers, plural, will know the First Start Partnership, for example. We do a lot of work across the piece, and there's a lot of specialists there. And I've met with somebody very high up, I don't know if I should say names, and discussed ideas there, and there's a lot of information there. And so as we reorganise the department, and people will be aware there are some changes in the department that have been announced, there will be more clarity in delegated roles and the outcomes that will be addressed and the structure of that department. I think that's a good thing, and I will say so. I'm very pleased that the children's part and the education part was separated. That gives a focus in a way. If you agree with that or not, I do believe that's been successful. And so the three areas are the main priorities of extending nursery provision, the school meals and lifelong learning. And I'm pleased to say, sir, that I believe that the school meals rollout will be complete. And I do recognise the work that's gone before. I do recognise all propositions ages ago, and I lost, and then they won, and then people got on with it. And then I pestered the previous minister, because I met him recently. He said, you pestered me. But what we've come to a point now is we can all sit down, hopefully, in a room and say, this Christmas, the final school, and the name of it has gone out of my head, and I do apologise, will have their first meal as Christmas lunch. And I think that's a very fitting time to do it. And it's a very successful project across assemblies and being driven at the moment, which is what I want to do. And I will say so that the nursery provision requires the funding from the government plan, and the additional work will be done via the development and the development of apprenticeships. Sorry, bad wording of what I've written here. The nursery work does require that, partly for training and partly because of the extra cost that will be involved. And as for apprenticeships, and I talked to the panel and others here, absolutely aware, the money going towards developing those apprenticeships is there. And I was pleased to accept the amendment of the panel. The work was in train and subject to the approval for the government debate. However, within the education and lifelong learning budget, I'll be allocating an additional 500,000 to apprenticeship funding. I've also accepted Amendment 5, which aligns with my ambition to improve locally available training opportunities. In doing so, we will broaden the career pathways available for our young people and strengthen local industries. Our work in this area has already been done, starting with an analysis of hard-to-fill roles and skills and qualifications needed for them. Sorry, this is a bit long on the phone, but it's important that I speak. Pending the state's approval, it will be complemented by the £2 million skills grant that was announced by the Better Business Support Package. And the concerns over businesses of the living wage and apprenticeships can be addressed with that, but it needs supporting. It needs that money. And if we're going to train, we need to do it. The time is now. That's a song, I think, so. This brings together a wider priority of the transition to the living wage and the support for training that our economy needs. So the other night I attended the Skills Awards night. A huge success, celebrated a success across the island, spoke to some of the business people there, spoke to some of the winners, the trainers, those who are trainees. And so I have to give a shout out to the winner of the Battle of the Bands, who put on a fantastic performance. They were extremely tight as a band, I thought. They were really, really good. So I'll finish quickly. So in 1895, there was a cartoon in Punch. It was referred to as the curate's egg. You probably know about this. And basically, sir, it's got a bishop who says, "I'm afraid, sir, you have a bad egg." And the curate says, "Oh no, my lord, I assure you that parts of it are excellent." And I've looked back, sir, and to be quite frank, I cannot find a single government plan that does not have an element of the curate's egg to it. And I have to throw in, sir, we need a reformed Jersey majority to get the perfect government plan. I can see Deputy Wall nodding. Thank you.
I just thought it was repetition because one Deputy Teddy said this joke yesterday or the day before.
I must say, sir,
this is the full story.
Didn't hear.
This is the historical lesson. We're all enjoying this.
I didn't hear Deputy Teddy at that point, I'm sorry. So I get extra time, sorry. The time we have as a government, and in this iteration of the Assembly, is limited, and it was mentioned, but that's true. Before the next election, so we have to prioritise. We must find ways to work together. And in terms of long-term impacts, the building of schools, the building of new, much needed, not existing at the moment, youth facilities, the living wage, the affordable housing, changes to affordable housing and people's rights, changes to the way social security payments work. Those are long-term things that will affect our island. And if they're not supported now, they're never going to be there. And so that's what we need to do. So I'll finish with this. Deputy Curtis is not here. We must not be fearful of change when it happens. To use another film quote, fear is the path to the dark side. Fear leads to anger, anger leads to hate, and hate leads to suffering. So I hope that the government plan is the next step towards making some change. I hope it can be supported. I want to get on with the work. And I'll mention one thing again to finish. When I launched the nursery report, I presented it and I made a statement to this Assembly so that you could ask questions for 15 minutes. I did that for transparency. I commit to continuing that transparency, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy. There's a point of clarification from Deputy Doublé. You content to accept that?
So can I just talk to Deputy Doublé separately, because everybody wants to go. They've been sat here for a long time. So I won't accept it this time, but not because I simply don't do that, but I'm quite honestly going to be open. I can put it in a letter to her publicly if she wants. So thank you.
Is the adjournment proposed? Are members content to adjourn till 2:15? Assembly's adjourned till 2:15.